Hello everyone, Omni-sensei here with What If I Were Reborn in MHA as DABI? Part 3. If you enjoy this content, smash the like button. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to check out the original story linked in the description.
No. Midoriya shook his head. I mean, literally. This isn't. Yeah. We're not done yet. Love the motivation, Midori. Warm-up's over. DABI cut in. Main exercise starts now. Every face in Class 1 is cycled through the same sequence. Confusion, disbelief, and horror, before arriving at a single, unified expression that could only be described as existential dread. This is hell. It was written on every face, etched into the trembling of every limb and confirmed by the tears forming in at least 3 pairs of eyes. And the ordeal was only day 1. A month. They had to endure this torture for a month? But through it all, the despair, agony, and the creeping certainty that their assistant teacher might actually be a sadist. One thing kept the complaints sealed behind clenched teeth. DABI wasn't watching from the sidelines. He was training alongside them, though the weight strapped to his body didn't look like theirs. Where their sets were dark metal with compression straps, his were something else entirely: dense, matte black slabs that looked less like training equipment and more like pieces of siege machinery bolted to a human frame. DABI's weight load.
Ankles 500 Kilogramm. Wrists 300 Kilogramm. Shoulders 150 Kilogramm. Waist 600 Kilogramm.
Total 2,500 kilograms. 2 metric and a half-ton strapped to one man. Breath of the Sun at full completion had turned his cardiovascular system into something that would make an Olympic athlete look vestigial: oxygen uptake, red cell density, and metabolic throughput all operating so far past the human ceiling, which wasn't even visible anymore. The completed super soldier serum had hardened his muscle fibers at the cellular level, every tendon reinforced to tensile strengths. And the arachnid genome, still early, barely 22%, integrated, was already weaving enhancements into his connective tissue and reflex architecture. For DABI, 2,500 kilos wasn't a strain, it barely qualified as exercise. He moved through his routine without much effort: squats, lunges, and weighted sprints that punched shallow craters into the packed earth. Kaminari stared at the weight slabs on DABI's waist from where he lay on the concrete, started counting, and stopped himself on principle. Don't. Zero croaked next to him. Just don't do the math. Hiroshima, face down on the ground, turned his head just enough to watch DABI knock out one-legged squats while carrying a literal ton. Something ignited in Kirishima's chest. That's what I am chasing? He pushed himself off the concrete. Arms screaming, legs worse, and everything below the waist felt like it had been packed with wet gravel. He stood anyway. The hell are you doing? Kaminari hissed. Kirishima grinned, blood on his teeth from a bitten lip. Being manly. And then, one by one, dragged upright by the stubborn, reluctant refusal to let someone else's strength be the excuse for their own weakness. The rest of One followed. DABI watched from the center of the training ground, 2,500 kilos on his body. 19 students clawed their way vertically around him. The corner of his mouth moved, a grin. A month later, UA Sports Festival. As expected, the stadium had been packed with full capacity since the morning of the first round of the sports festival. Thousands of spectators filled every available seat. Civilians seeking entertainment, professional heroes scouting talent, media representatives from every major network, and agency scouts ready to grab interesting candidates. This was the biggest stage for UA students, their first real challenge. DABI stood in the staff observation area with other faculty members and watched the proceedings from the first round while also analyzing the changes in his students. He was actually offered to be a commentator, but his mind was sane enough to instantly reject it. Just like the anime, that honor belonged to present Mike and Aizawa, whose dynamic was interesting, to say the least. And here we are, folks, the semi-finals of the UA Sports Festival. Present Mick's voice boomed across the stadium with its usual excessive enthusiasm. The next match is gonna be absolutely explosive. Or should I say, icy? Get it? Because... Just introduce them. Aizawa's dry voice cut through. Your puns are painful. You're no fun, Eraserhead. Anyway, introducing our competitors. DABI almost smiled at their banter. Those two had been doing this routine for years. The preliminary rounds had gone mostly as expected. Midoriya had advanced through a combination of strategy and his newly developed technique. With an explosive quirk and natural intuition, Bakugo had unpredictably dominated. Todoroki, still stuck to his composed self, had frozen his way through opponents with overwhelming ice power, never once using his fire side. Overall, Class 1A had been the clear dominant side compared to the other classes. But the semi-finals were where things would get intense. Semi-final match, Izuku Midoriya vs. Shoto Todoroki. The two students faced each other in the arena. The first match of the second round. The contrast was stark. Midoriya looked nervous but determined, his green eyes bright with focus. Todoroki, unlike his usual aloof self, seemed ragingly focused and frustrated to prove a point to someone. Both students have shown incredible growth this year, Present Mike announced. Midoriya went from last place in the entrance exam to the semi-finals. And Todoroki hasn't taken a single hit in any of his matches. What do you think, Mr. Aizawa? Who's going to win? We can't predict the outcome, Aizawa replied calmly. But Midoriya will have a tough time if Todoroki decides to use his fire quirk as well. But in the first place, why would he handicap himself like that? Just watch the match. Midnight raised her whip. Begin! Todoroki went all out from the very start. His right foot slammed into the ground, and a massive wave of ice erupted across the arena. The same overwhelming opening move he had used in every previous match. Flash freezed the opponent before they could react. But Midoriya was ready. One for all. Full cowling 5%. Green lightning crackled across Midoriya's body as he launched himself to the side, dodging the ice wave with enhanced speed. The crowd gasped at the display. Whoa! It's the same lightning speed again. Present Mike shouted. Just what kind of stuff are you teaching your students, Aizawa? During the sports festival's first event, the obstacle race, Midoriya had used full cowling. A technique he developed during the brutal training course DABI had forced them through. Because of that, clearing the first round had been almost effortless for him. He crossed the finish line in first place. The second round was the cavalry battle, and once again Class 1A really displayed why they are the best of the best. It wasn't just Midoriya who had improved. Everyone from 1A did. Each of them had grown in their own way during that training. Now the tournament has reached the battle round. In one of those fights, Midoriya had been forced to push his power above 5% just to win. That moment told the commentators something important. He still wasn't using his full strength. Because when he had used it before, the fight would end in a single move. Yet nobody is sure who is going to win. Will it be Midoriya, barely standing due to his own quirk overpowering his body? Or will it be Todoroki, who might miraculously dodge the one-strike KO? Whatever it might be, one thing is certain. The outcome of the match will be brutal to the point of even questioning what these generations of children may achieve. I didn't teach him that. Maybe someone else did, Aizawa said, leaning forward with interest. But it's clear he is using his quirk differently now. In his match with Rikido Sato Sugarman, he had to use power beyond what his body could handle, concentrating everything into single, devastating strikes that shattered his own limbs. His eyes followed Midoriya's movements. But the version he has been using since the obstacle race appears to be a constant, low-level activation spread across his entire body. enhancing his speed and strength without the same self-destructive backlash. Smart, but can it stand up to Todoroki's ice? Todoroki's eyes narrowed as he responded immediately, sending another wave of ice across the arena. Then another, trying to overwhelm Midoriya with sheer volume and speed. But Midoriya kept moving. Using total concentration breathing, he maintained full cowling, without the loss of concentration or drain on his stamina. "You have improved a lot, Midoriya," Todoroki said, his voice carrying across the arena despite the roaring crowd. "Honestly, you surprise me every time, but no matter what, I have no intention of losing today. If you want to win that desperation, then use your full power, like everyone else here," Midoriya called back, then pushed his enhancement to 8%. Green lightning intensified. He launched himself forward, closing the distance faster than Todoroki had seen in this duel. Their clash was immediate and intense. Midoriya's enhanced punches met Todoroki's ice constructs. Every time Todoroki created a barrier, Midoriya would find a way around it, over, under, or through weak points. "This is incredible." President Mike was practically vibrating in his seat. Midoriya's moving like a completely different fighter. But Todoroki's not making it easy. Indeed, Todoroki was adapting. His ice formations became more faster walls, spikes, slides that tried to control the battlefield and limit Midoriya's mobility. They fought in earnest for several minutes, neither gaining a decisive advantage. The crowd was on its feet, watching two of the UA's most promising first years push each other to their limits. Then Midoriya did something unexpected. He started talking. "Todoroki." His voice cut through the sound of breaking ice. "You are still holding back." Todoroki's expression flickered. "Then what about you, Midoriya? Those words don't seem to apply to you. You have been holding back from the start too." And he wasn't wrong. Midoriya hesitated for a split second. A towering wall of ice was already rushing toward him, jagged and fast. He lifted his hand, not using 5% or 8 or even 15, which was the limit his body could handle. 100%. The same reckless output he had used when he first inherited One for All. Seeing that, Todoroki was taken aback. He needed more solid defense to block the incoming attack now, or else he would be blown out of the ring. He got it up just in time. The impact was unlike anything the stadium had witnessed in this tournament. A shockwave ripped across the arena, shredding concrete, scattering debris into the stands, and forcing spectators to brace against their seats. When the dust thinned, Todoroki stood a few steps from the boundary line, while the ice wall supported his back, barely in bounds. And Midoriya was still standing at the center of the ring, pale-faced, his right hand hanging at a wrong angle, obviously broken. But he lifted it anyway, curling those shattered fingers into a fist, teeth clenched so hard the tendons in his neck stood out like cables. "Now, it's your turn. Give me everything you have got." In the stands, Endeavor leaned forward. The flames wreathing his body crackled brighter, pupils locked on the arena floor with an intensity that bordered on hunger. In the VIP section, several pro heroes exchanged uneasy glances. This duel had stopped being a school match a while ago and might turn into something deadly if the fight continues. "Why, Midoriya?" Todoroki's voice came out uneven, half demanding and half something he didn't want to name. "It doesn't make sense. Why are you going this far?" "Because your power isn't just your father's." Midoriya's statement tore across the arena in a plea. "You're not him. You're you. And if you want to be the best hero you can be, if you actually want to win, then you need to accept all of yourself. Don't talk like you understand." Todoroki's ice erupted in every direction, wild, uncontrolled, cracking across the arena floor in jagged spikes. "You don't know anything about Tor. I don't, never will I. I know nothing about you or what you have gone through, but Dabi-sensei did too. He had gone through a lot. That didn't make him stop using his fire quirk. I know what it's like to be told you can't be a hero. Midoriya fired back without flinching. I know what it's like to have people look at you and see nothing, to doubt yourself so badly you almost believe them. But I am standing here anyway, and I am not going to lose to someone who won't even fight me at full strength. Something behind Todoroki's eyes shattered. Memories flooded back. His mother's face, his father's training, the boiling water, the scar, and the hatred that had consumed him for so long. But also, other voices, newer ones. DABI during the first day at UA. You only use ice, so you are third. Todoroki was not directly told he was weak, and he is in third place because he chose to be less than he truly was. His hatred for Endeavor had drawn a line down the middle of his own body, declaring half of himself off limits. He had turned his father's shadow into a cage, locked himself inside it, and called it his liberty. Todoroki looked down at his left hand, the fireside. For years, he hadn't used it, not even acknowledged it existed. It was his power, Endeavor's legacy branded into his genes, and rejecting it had felt like the only rebellion available to him. But Midoriya, standing there with a broken hand and blood on his teeth, wasn't asking him to forgive his father. He was asking him to stop limiting himself. Todoroki's left side ignited. Flames erupted across his body. Red, orange, white hot at the core, bright enough to force the front rows to shield their eyes and feel the heat on their skin from 50 meters away. Fire and ice collided across his frame, generating massive plumes of steam and vapor that swallowed the arena whole. The crowd went wild. Todoroki's using his fire quirk. Present Mike was screaming into his microphone so loud it distorted. This is unprecedented. In all his matches, in the entire festival, he's never used his left side. This is a significant change in the battle, Aizawa said, and for once there was actual emotion in his voice. Whatever Midoriya said to him, it worked. Todoroki finally uses both halves of his quirk, although that might work against Midoriya now. What does this mean? It means, Aizawa said grimly, that things are about to get intense. The temperature in the stadium spiked dramatically. On to Todoroki's right, the air froze, frost spreading across the arena floor and walls, and to his left, heat shimmered through the air, hot enough to turn the concrete red. Both students were breathing hard now, staring at each other across the vapor-filled arena. Thank you, Midoriya, Todoroki said quietly, for reminding me who I am. But I should apologize for what I am about to do next. Then he moved, ice and fire erupting in tandem. A massive glacier formed from his right side while flames from his left superheated it, creating explosive pressure. The combination attack was devastating, far more powerful than ice or fire alone could ever be. Midoriya's eyes widened. Full cowling was out of the question now to block that. He needs to go all out. He thought of his mother, of his dream, of everyone who had believed in him. One more time. I can break myself one more time if it means winning. One for all. 100%. Midoriya's entire left arm lit up with green lightning, far brighter than before. The power surge was immediate and catastrophic. His arm began to pressurize under his quirk, but he drew back and punched. Detroit. Todoroki released his combination attack. Smaz. The two attacks collided at the center of the arena, triggering an apocalyptic explosion as ice, fire, and raw concussive force met at a single point, sending a visible wall of compressed air rippling outward while the arena floor cracked and the remaining ice structures shattered. And debris, massive chunks of concrete, shards of ice the size of cars, and pieces of the arena itself flew in all directions, including the stands. The crowd's cheers turned into screams. Cementos tried to raise defensive walls, but he was too slow, and present mixed commentary cut off mid-sentence as pro-heroes rose to their feet, ready to intervene. But before anyone could have made a move, DABI was already in action. Blue flames erupted from his position in the staff area, spreading across the stadium in a massive wave. Every piece of debris flying toward the spectators was incinerated mid-flight. Ice shards vaporized into harmless steam, concrete chunks crumbled into ash and powder, and the fire spread across the stadium like a protective dome, forming a barrier between the battlefield and the audience. And incredibly, impossibly, the spectators didn't even feel the heat. The flames were so precisely controlled that they only burned what DABI wanted them to burn, and nothing else. Temperature regulation at the molecular level allowed each flame to be individually directed and controlled, creating a display of quirk mastery so precise that every pro hero present in attendance fell silent. Holy! Present Mick's voice was awed. Did you see that, Eraserhead? The assistant teacher just... Aizawa covered one ear. I did, and so did everyone else. Stop shouting like you're trying to burst my eardrums. The blue flames lasted exactly 3 seconds, long enough to neutralize all debris, then disappeared as suddenly as they had appeared. In the VIP section, Endeavor watched with an expression that cycled through several emotions too quickly to name. His youngest son had finally used his fire, combining both halves of his quirk in a devastating display that even Endeavor himself would struggle to replicate. Yet it was his eldest son, the one he had believed dead, the supposed failure who couldn't handle his own quirk, who had just demonstrated a level of fire control surpassing anything Endeavor had achieved in 20 years of hero work. How? The thought consumed him. How did Toya become that strong? His body couldn't handle fire. He was just a fail. There was no time to process it. The vapor in the arena was already clearing, revealing that both students were down. Midoriya's arms are both completely shattered, bones broken in multiple places, each limb hanging at an unnatural angle. He was still conscious, but the pain was obvious. His teeth clenched tightly as he fought through it. Todoroki was conscious as well, but utterly exhausted. Using both sides of his quirk together for the first time in years had drained nearly all his stamina. He remained on his knees, breathing heavily, frost and small flames flickering around him without control. But there was one crucial difference between their positions. Midoriya had used the force of his 100% punch to propel himself backward during the collision. His broken body had landed just outside the boundary line. Todoroki had held his ground during the attack and is inside the ring. Midnight checked their positions carefully, then raised her whip. Midoriya is out of bounds. Todoroki wins by ring out. There was a moment of stunned silence. Then the crowd erupted. Todoroki wins. Present Mick's voice cracked from the volume. Despite being neck to neck, he takes the match. What a fight. What a sports festival. Both students pushed far beyond their limits, Aizawa said, and there was something close to pride in his normally flat voice. Midoriya destroyed his arms to match Todoroki's power. Todoroki overcame years of self-imposed restraint to use his full quirk. This is what the sports festival is meant to show, students discovering what they are truly capable of. Recovery Girl was already rushing into the arena with her medical team. In the stands, some people were crying, a few were cheering, but everyone was talking about what they had just witnessed. And in the staff area, DABI allowed himself a small smile. Not too shabby, problem children. Final match. Katsuki Bakugo versus Shoto Todoroki. The finals were delayed by 30 minutes to let Todoroki recover. Midoriya was in the infirmary with a cast on his arm, but he had insisted on watching the final match on a monitor. He wanted to see who would win. The crowd was buzzing with anticipation. After that semi-final display, everyone expected something spectacular. The two finalists faced each other across the repaired arena. Bakugo looked like a contained volcano on the verge of eruption, while Todoroki, now acutely aware of the reckless, adrenaline-fueled choices he had made in his last match, looked conflicted once more. Final match. Present Mike announced. Bakugo Katsuki versus Todoroki Shoto. The winner becomes this year's sports festival champion. Both students are powerhouses, Aizawa observed. Bakugo has surprisingly shown consistently tactical thinking alongside his raw power. Todoroki has just unlocked his full potential. This should be the most competitive match of the day. Midnight raised her whip. Begin! Bakugo exploded forward immediately, his quirk propelling him across the arena in a burst of force and heat, closing the distance before Todoroki could set up. But Todoroki was prepared. Ice erupted from his right side, forming a wall between them. Bakugo blew through it with a concentrated explosion, sending ice shards flying. Todoroki countered with fire from his left, melting his own ice to create a cloud of steam that obscured vision. Present Mike shouted, using the interaction between his two quirks to create tactical advantages. Bakugo wasn't deterred. He blasted away the steam with a series of explosions, his sharp combat instincts already tracking Todoroki's position through the vapor. They clashed in the center as explosions met ice and fire met fire, turning the arena into a war zone of colliding temperatures and devastating power. During the training period, they didn't just go through physical exercises. They also underwent combat training, including one-on-one sparring with DABI. Though he didn't even use his fire quirk, it was hardly fair to call it a real spar. Even so, it provided Class 1A with the valuable yet nightmarish experience they needed, which they had not signed up for. Bakugo was relentless in his approach, launching attack after attack without giving Todoroki any space to breathe and forcing him to defend and counter at the same time. Todoroki countered with a combination attack, using ice to pin Bakugo's position and then fire to force him to dodge. From the stands, Endeavor shouted, "That's IT Shoto. That's how you do it. Show them why you'll take first place." Present Mike laughed into the microphone. "Look at that. Even the number 2 hero is just a passionate parent cheering for his kid." Off to the side, Aizawa made a small, uncomfortable expression, as if suggesting it might have been better if Endeavor had simply stayed quiet. Something was wrong in the arena, as Todoroki's movements suddenly slowed, his flames flickering and dying down while the ice he created formed weaker than before. Bakugo noticed it immediately, his combat instincts too sharp to miss the signs. "Oi!" Half and half. His voice carried across the arena, fierce and demanding. "Don't you dare lose focus in the middle of a fight. I am not." Bakugo noticed it immediately, his combat instincts too sharp to miss the signs. "Oi!" Half and half. His voice carried across the arena, fierce and demanding. "Don't you dare lose focus in the middle of a fight. I am not. Are you kidding me?" Bakugo's explosions intensified, frustration fueling his power. "I didn't come this far to fight someone who's half-assed. I am trying." Todoroki's flames sparked and tried to grow but couldn't be maintained. His body was shutting down, prioritizing survival over quirk output. "Shut up and give me everything, or I will blast you out of this ring." Todoroki tried to create a defensive wall, ice on one side and fire on the other, the same combination he had used against Midoriya, but his flames died out mid-formation, his ice formed weak and incomplete, and Bakugo's explosion shattered through it like paper. Howitzer. Bakugo spun in mid-air, building up explosive force. Impact. The concentrated blast caught Todoroki's center mass, sending him flying backward. He crashed into the arena wall and slumped down, completely spent. Midnight checked him quickly. Todoroki is unable to continue. Bakugo wins, Present Mike announced. And we have our champion. Bakugo Katsuki wins the UA Sports Festival. But the crowd's reaction was muted and confused. They had expected a climactic finish like the semi-final, yet instead witnessed a one-sided beatdown in the final moments. And Bakugo himself looked furious. He stood in the center of the destroyed arena, breathing hard, fists clenched so tight his palms were bleeding from his own quirk's recoil. "That's not a win!" he screamed at no one in particular. Explosions started popping off his palms erratically. "You gave up. You stopped trying. That's not." "Bakugo," Midnight started. "I wanted to beat you at your best." He whirled on Todoroki, who was being helped to his feet by medical staff. "Not this. Not some half-dead version who ran out of gas." "Bakugo, please calm down. Don't tell me to calm down." The explosions were getting bigger, more dangerous. "I earned this fight. I earned a real victory. And you," he pointed at Todoroki, "you just quit." Security moved in, but Bakugo was spiraling into a full meltdown. His quirk was activating, driven by rage and disappointment. The moment wasn't the victory he wanted. He had won, but it felt hollow, as if the championship had been handed to him rather than earned. Like Todoroki had simply given it away out of weakness. And for someone like Bakugo, who valued genuine achievement over everything, that was worse than losing. "This is bullshit." Another explosion, bigger this time. "What's the point of being number one if—" DABI appeared beside him in a blur of movement. His hand clamped onto Bakugo's shoulder as he said, "Enough." The single word carried weight and authority, anger absent, leaving only finality. Bakugo whirled, teeth bared and palms popping with lethal heat. "He didn't even use his left. I didn't win shit if he—" "You are right. He didn't." DABI interrupted, his voice a low, dangerous drawl that cut through the roar of the crowd. "You will get handed a trophy because your opponent grew a conscience mid-fight. It's pathetic, isn't it?" Bakugo froze, his eyes blown wide and trembling with fury. "You want to blow up the arena? Go ahead." DABI continued, leaning in until only he was visible for Bakugo. "Prove to everyone that half and half managed to break your composure without even trying. Show them that his conflict is more powerful than your will. Right now, you don't look like a winner, kid. You look like a dog barking at a fence because it can't jump. The win is on the board. Take the dirty victory and choke on it until the next time you face him." DABI said, his grip tightening just enough to be a warning. "Then you crush him so thoroughly that even if his entire family is dying in the stands, he has no choice but to look at you. Make yourself unavoidable. But if you get disqualified now for attacking a medic, you are just giving him an easy exit." Bakugo stared at him, the lethal glow in his palms finally fading into thin wisps of smoke. "Fine." Bakugo spat, jerking his shoulder out of DABI's grip. "Good choice. Now move. You are making a scene, and it's embarrassing to watch." The security teams, who had been hovering on the edge of a panic attack, visibly deflated as Bakugo's quirk died out. The rage remained. A dark, simmering pool in the boy's eyes, but the volcano had been capped. DABI stepped back, hands sliding into his pockets as he headed toward the tunnel without a second glance. Present Mick's voice exploded over the intercom, breaking the suffocating tension. "Would you look at that? Unbelievable. Even the Class 1A tiger can be tamed. Ooh. Really does have some, intense teachers." In the observation booth, Aizawa didn't join in the cheering. He simply watched DABI's retreating back and shook his head. That wasn't teaching or even disciplining, but a calculated manipulation of one predator by another. Aizawa looked at Bakugo, who was now walking away with a terrifying, focused stillness. He couldn't blame the kid for listening. Anyone who had survived a training session with that scarred psychopath knew that when DABI told you to stop, he wasn't worried about the rules. He was giving you a chance to survive. The medal ceremony proceeded. Fortunately, Bakugo had to be convinced to actually stand on the podium, though his expression was a thunderous mask of wounded pride. Beside him, Todoroki accepted the silver with a haunted, mechanical stoicism, with the lingering tremors of overexertion. Then there was Midoriya, clutching his bronze with a tired, genuine smile that spoke of a different kind of victory. As the crowds began to disperse, the students returning to their families, and the pro-heroes discussing what they had seen, DABI remained in the staff area. He had learned what he needed to learn. Midoriya had finally developed a sustainable way to use his quirk. Still had issues with control at high percentages, but the full cowling technique was a massive improvement. But it seemed Todoroki still needed a small push to overcome the limitations he had placed on himself. Nonetheless, it was progress. And Bakugo, well, in most cases, the one who loses learns more than the one who wins. All three of his problem children had grown today, and that was enough. This is going to be a long year, DABI thought, watching them from above. But somehow, despite everything, he was looking forward to it. His gaze drifted, scanning the dispersing crowd until it landed on a familiar flash of engine blue hair. Tenya Ida was still present. In the original outcome, Ida had taken third place. This time he hadn't, but that wasn't what mattered. What mattered was that he was still at the festival. From what DABI remembered of the timeline, the next event after the sports festival was supposed to be the hero killer incident. Stain attacked pro-heroes in Hosu City, Ida's brother Tensei, Ingenium, being critically injured, and the news reaching Tenya, pushing him toward revenge. That chain of events should have already begun. Yet across the arena, Ida was standing with Midoriya and the others, congratulating them with his usual earnest enthusiasm, which meant the call had never come. His parents hadn't contacted him about Tensei being attacked, and Ingenium's career hadn't ended, all because only 1 out of 3 people who took the top spots has the true qualities of a hero. A voice beside DABI spoke quietly. "See? I told you. The future of our hero society isn't bright." DABI sighed. Yeah. Give it a rest, Kaizome. You want to become some hero killer or what?" The man beside him was tall and lean, with a weathered face and intense eyes that burned with conviction. He wore civilian clothes, but there was an edge to him, the controlled violence of someone who had seen too much and decided to do something about it. Kaizome Akaguro is better known by the name he would have taken in another timeline. Stain, the hero killer. But in this timeline, things had gone differently. Look at the boy on the top step. Kaizome spat, nodding toward Bakugo. He screams for blood and threatens his own peers. He values the win over life. How can you stand there and tell me he belongs in the light? DABI leaned against the railing, his voice dropping into a low, unwavering drawl. Because that brat would walk through hell to win a fight, Kaizome. And in a world that's actually burning, I would rather have a violent winner standing in front of me than a polite loser who gives up because his feelings are hurt. He has got the drive. The heart comes later. Trust me. Kaizome paused, his eyes searching DABI's face. He had seen that look before, the absolute, terrifying certainty DABI held when he spoke about the potential of these problem children. "And you?" Kaizome asked, a ghost of a smirk touching his lips. "Where do you fit into this bright future? You talk about the heart of a hero as if you've actually seen one." DABI snorted, a dry, self-deprecating sound. "Me? Don't be ridiculous. If we're grading on heroic purity, I would have been executed in the preliminary rounds. I am just the trash collector making sure the street is clear for them." To DABI's genuine confusion, Kaizome actually laughed. A short, jagged sound of pure amusement. "What?" DABI frowned. "Did I miss the joke?" "Nothing," Kaizome said, shaking his head. "Nothing at all." But it wasn't nothing. What made Kaizome laugh was the sheer, staggering absurdity of the man standing before him. This hero who still refused to believe he was a hero in the truest sense. Just a month ago, DABI had risked his life to save students at USJ, fighting 2 monsters called Nomu simultaneously, and nearly died protecting kids he had only known for a few months. And before that, before he even became a properly licensed hero, He had faced down the mass murderer muscular while his own body was still struggling with cancer. He saved 2 professionals and a child from becoming orphans, all while facing the uncertainty of his heart potentially stopping before sunrise. And what kind of situation had shaped him into the person he was now? A good teacher, a clear path ahead, and a peaceful childhood? Hell no. Stain knew DABI's story about Endeavor's abuse, the 3 years he had spent in a coma while villains experimented on him, and how he had woken up in a body that was falling apart at any given moment. DABI had every reason to be the most hateful creature on the planet. He had been given every tool necessary to become a monster. And what did all that make him choose to be? To be a hero. Stain wasn't sure he could have stayed on that path if it had been him. No, actually, he was certain he couldn't have. If DABI hadn't reached out to him when he did, if he hadn't dragged Kaizome out of his own brewing madness, Stain knew exactly what he would have become. And it definitely wouldn't have been bright, not even close. He would have been a murderer in a red scarf. He looked at DABI, who was currently staring back at him with genuine, irritated confusion. It was the ultimate irony. The man who embodied the true hero, more than any gold-clad idol on a billboard, was the only person alive who didn't believe in himself. DABI was that kind of hero, a hero who would never realize how great he was. Maybe it was better he didn't realize it, Stain thought. Pride tended to ruin people, but it was still a hell of a joke. Stain, we brought goods. The voice broke through Stain's thoughts. A young man with bright green scales and a reptilian appearance approached, his pink eyes bright with enthusiasm. Shuichi Iguchi, in another timeline, he would have been called Spinner, a villain obsessed with Stain's ideology. In this one, he was a licensed hero who had found purpose through Stain's reformed philosophy. Jin Babaigawara, beside him, was practically vibrating. Snacks. I got the ones with the extra salt. I forgot the drinks. No, wait. They're in the bag. I drank them all. Jin Babaigawara quirked twice. His split personality disorder made communication challenging, but his loyalty was absolute. Could you two love birds tone it down? Shuichi called out over his shoulder, gesturing toward the pair following them. I am getting a toothache just looking at you. He was talking to Manami Aiba, known as La Brava, and Danjiro Tabita, known as Gentle. The two of them were in their own world, holding hands and sharing a look of such pure, saccharine devotion, like teenagers despite being in their 20s. DABI watched them approach, his eyes narrowing in a half-hearted attempt to look annoyed. He wasn't sure what to call them. His team, he hadn't created any official hero agency like other pros did. They simply gathered together from time to time, working together when necessary and supporting one another. A collection of people who would have been villains in another timeline had found a different path in this one. Did you actually do the scouting? DABI sighed. Or did you just go on a double date to the vending machines? The intelligence is secured, Mr. DABI, Gentle declared with a theatrical bow. And the tea is, well, it's lukewarm, but the sentiment is boiling. The stadium cameras briefly showed DABI in the crowd. He wasn't famous, but it has been changing for the last month, and it's the same with his team. Despite not matching any top 10 list of heroes, but it might be due to their weird group dynamic and unconventional methods, they were well-known heroes. In the commentary booth, Present Mike sat up straighter. Oh, hey, Eraserhead, isn't that... Again. Keep your voice down, Aizawa muttered. Since the tournament and the awards ceremony were already over, they needed to find other ways to entertain the crowd while the remaining formalities were being completed. For those who don't know, that's Blue Sun, the underground hero. Present Mike continued at his usual excessive volume. And also Class 1, IS assistant teacher. He's here watching his students. Obviously, where else would he be? And check out the squad. The so-called Reformed Ravagers, the Misfit Mavericks. Nobody calls them that, Mike. You have been reading too many fan forums. Details. Look at them. You've got Gentle Criminal and L.A. Brava. The dynamic duo of redemption. The reptilian rescuer. Iguchi. And Jean. On screen, Jean twice was currently trying to eat a sandwich through his mask while simultaneously arguing with himself. Truly a unique powerhouse team. But then another figure entered the camera frame, and present mixed commentary reached a new octave. Wait, is that... Oh man, this is great. Endeavor, the number 2 hero, is approaching Blue Sun. The camera zoomed in. From a distance, it looked like a quintessential Hero Society moment. The legendary veteran approaching the young teacher to discuss the future of a prodigy. Just imagine the conversation. Mikgushed. Endeavor, the proud father, checking in with the man who guides his son. The mentorship, the professionalism. It's enough to bring a tear to your eye. Aizawa squinted at the screen. He saw DABI's hand slip into his pocket, and the way the reformed crew suddenly shifted their weight as the playful bickering vanished into a unified, predatory silence. Meek, Aizawa said, his voice low and sharp. Cut the feed. Now. Don't be a spoilsport eraser. Look at that handshake. Oh wait, no handshake. They're just talking. I bet they're discussing Shoto's strategic shift in the finals. It's all about communication. Folks, what the cameras couldn't pick up was the actual conversation, which was probably for the best. I see you've surrounded yourself with a collection of societal refuse. Endeavor rumbled, his voice a low vibration of pure arrogance. I suppose failures naturally gravitate toward... Hey, Enji. DABI interrupted. His voice was a flat, freezing blade that sliced right through the older man's bravado. You absolute piece of shit. Endeavor's flames actually stuttered. What? I will beat the living shit out of you, you scum. If it's the last thing I ever do, DABI said, leaning in until his face was inches from Endeavor's mask. You absolute bastard. Don't you ever dare talk to me again. And keep your mouth shut when you are talking about my people. The group around them had gone hushed. Stain's eyes were sharp, watching. The others looked uncomfortable but not surprised. They had heard DABI's opinions on Endeavor before. Endeavor bristled, his heat spiking dangerously. You think you can speak to me? Now get the hell out of here before I create an even bigger mess. DABI continued. No. Better yet, I will leave first. Just looking at your face, breathing the same air as you, the fact that I still live under the same sun as a man like you. If it were up to me, I would beat that arrogant confidence out of you 1,000,000 times over, and I still wouldn't be satisfied. Endeavor stood paralyzed. For the first time in his career, the flame hero looked extinguished. I am letting you slide. DABI hissed, his eyes glowing a lethal, haunting blue. Only because your youngest son is standing right there. So for the love of God, piss off. And don't you ever dare approach me again. The silence was absolute. Everyone within earshot had frozen in their tracks. Todoroki, who had been trailing behind his father like a ghost, couldn't maintain his stoic mask. His eyes were blown wide and his mouth slightly agape as he looked between the number 2 hero and his brother. A random civilian who had overheard stepped forward. Hey, how can you talk to the number 2 hero like that? Didn't your parents teach you manners? DABI turned to face them, his expression neutral. Sorry. Father died a long time ago, and Mom was sick. So nope, fresh out of manners. Without another word, he turned his back on the ranked hero and walked away, his group falling into step behind him. Endeavor didn't move as he stood in the middle of the stadium, the echoes of that hatred ringing in his ears. He had been criticized before. Public opinion had always been a fickle flame, respecting his power while flinching at his methods. But this encounter was different. This child was his own son. his eldest son, whom he had believed dead, had returned changed, harder, and looked at him with such absolute hatred that even Endeavor's flames seemed to dim. One question kept echoing in his mind. Unbidden and unwelcome, was I really that terrible of a father? The question felt pathetic even as it formed. The answer was obvious, wasn't it? His son had literally changed his name and hidden for years rather than come home. High above, Present Mike was still spinning gold out of lead, his voice booming over the speakers. Wow, that must have been quite a conversation. Look at Endeavor's expression. So thoughtful, so contemplative. And Blue Sun is walking away now. Present Mike continued. Talk about dedication. He's likely off to prep the next round of training. Truly, the UA system is top-notch when the number 2 hero takes this much time to synergize with the staff. Aizawa, who had better eyes and could read body language from the booth, knew exactly what had happened. That hadn't been a professional exchange between a parent and a teacher. Meek. Aizawa said quietly, Yeah, buddy? Redirect the cameras. Focus on the aftermath of award ceremony. But this is such good. Now, Mike. Something in Aizawa's tone, a rare, jagged edge of genuine concern, made the announcer comply. The broadcast cut sharply back to the podium, where the students were awkwardly clutching their medals. You're no fun sometimes, you know that? Mike muttered, his mic keyed off. I know, Aizawa replied, but trust me on this one. The rest of the festival proceeded normally toward its conclusion, a blur of cheering crowds and departing families. To the masses, the whole festival had been a day of triumph and professional unity, giving the glimpse of what the future hero society holds. They are least concerned about the underground tensions, and that is how it was meant to be. Later parking area, near a nondescript SUV, DABI's group gathered, the playful energy of the afternoon replaced by a heavy, protective silence. That was quite the display, Mr. DABI, Gentle said softly, adjusting his cravat with a hand that wasn't quite steady. Even by your standards, the air felt thin. He deserved every word, Stain rasped, leaning against the vehicle as his eyes remained fixed on the stadium exit. And he deserves the reckoning that follows. I wasn't suggesting otherwise, Gentle added quickly, a somber nod to the gravity of the moment. Gene paced in a tight circle, his head twitching. You okay, boss? You looked like you were gonna melt the pavement. You looked cool as a cucumber. I am fine, DABI said. He meant it to sound dismissive, but his voice was tight, and the knuckles were white. Seeing Endeavor in person always had that effect on him. It stripped away the DABI he had carefully built, dragging him back into the skin of a broken child named Toya, a boy who had been told his only value was the heat he could produce. We should move, Shuichi suggested, checking the perimeter. Before the press catches wind of that profound summit between you two and tries to get a quote. I am not in the mood to lie to a camera today. That got a few chuckles from the group. Great plan, Gene cheered, hopping into the van. We should stay for autographs. They left together, an unlikely group of heroes who had found each other in the margins of society. And behind them, Endeavor still stood in the stadium, wrestling with questions he had avoided for too long. The festival was over, but the real challenges were just beginning. UA High School staff dormitories. Fuyumi Todoroki stopped in front of the door marked DABI Torino. A rabbit sticker and another small decal sat off to the side, but her gaze lingered on the name a moment longer, the sting of it settling somewhere she couldn't quite explain. She pushed it down, shaking her head lightly, composure returning as she steadied the tiered bento box in one hand. Her other hand lifted toward the doorbell, then paused, hovering there, caught between hesitation and worry. For more than a decade, her whole family was living in mourning for her brother's death. only to learn he had been alive all along. It was a cruel reality to see him behave like he was a stranger, but she was also eternally grateful that he was alive. Fuyumi wasn't a fighter like her brothers, but she had a different kind of stubbornness. She wasn't giving up. She rang the bell. Inside the dorm, Rumi Usajiyama was sprawled across the oversized rug, guiding Eri through a proper hero stretch, the scene so domestic it felt almost unreal until the knock broke it. Her ears snapped upright instantly. At his desk, buried under student files, DABI didn't turn, though his pen paused mid-stroke. "I didn't order anything." "I know." "Well, go check it." On it. Rumi huffed, pushing herself up. There was no caution in her approach. This was UA's faculty housing, and even with public trust shaken after the recent attack, an intruder still felt unlikely. Not that it would have mattered to her, especially when she already had a good idea who was on the other side, and suspected DABI did too. So she didn't bother with politeness, yanked the door open hard, and filled the frame like a wall of muscle and white fur, her red eyes locking straight onto Fuyumi. The schools closed to visitors teach, especially uninvited ones. I brought dinner," Fuyumi said, voice unsteady as she tried to look past her. Toya's favorite salted ginger pork. "I thought maybe." DABI pushed to his feet. "Fuyumi." "Toya?" She slipped past Rumi, bold enough to earn a brief flicker of respect, and set the bento on the table before steadying herself. "I am sorry for coming unannounced, but I heard you have been visiting Mom at the hospital, and I wanted to thank you." Rumi leaned against the doorframe with her arms crossed, thoughts churning as she wondered if she hated this woman. Part of her wanted to hate the entire Todoroki bloodline, until her eyes caught the details. 10 marks on Fuyumi's fingers, small cutlery cuts across her palm. Pathetic, she thought. This woman's entire existence was a desperate, thankless attempt to stitch a shredded family back together. And the worst part? Nobody thanked her for it, and it clearly wasn't working. Pathetic. Yes, but also brave. And that was the problem, because she didn't truly hate DABI's siblings. What she felt was closer to a reluctant, bitter pity. They weren't enemies, just collateral, children caught in the fallout of a father's obsession and a mother's breaking point. "Papa!" The small whisper cut through the heavy atmosphere. Eri was tugging on DABI's shirt, her wide eyes moving between the adults. Fuyumi's expression shattered into something soft as she looked at the girl. "Little Eri." "Hee, you are the sister who came to help Papa that day, right?" Eri giggled, the memory of the blood donation at the hospital. "Yes, thank you for remembering me, Eri-chan." Fuyumi's lip quivered. She reached out tenderly and nearly exhaled in relief when Eri didn't flinch. The girl leaned into the embrace with a natural, trusting grace that made DABI let out a long, weary sigh. He didn't pull her away, but the conflict in his eyes was palpable. Fuyumi pulled back just enough to look at Eri. "And I wanted to thank you for visiting my mom. She was... It seems you have got the wrong idea." DABI cut in, face unreadable. "I never visited anyone at the hospital." "Huh?" Fuyumi faltered, unsure how to respond. She had no proof, only what the nurse mentioned about someone visiting now and then, and this time a little girl bringing gifts, but the moment slipped from her. "Oh, the beautiful lady is your mom?" Eri asked, tilting her head. "Yes, she is." "I have no idea what Eri's talking about," DABI added quickly, trying to shut it down. In the background, Rumi had already gone back to her stretches, uninterested at least on the surface. DABI's denial didn't last. "But why did she look so sad?" Eri continued, brows furrowing. "Maybe she is just bored in the hospital?" "Maybe," Fuyumi said, her voice tightening before she forced a smile. "But the doctors say she needs to get a little stronger before she can come home." Eri brightened instantly. "Then I will give her my oats." Fuyumi blinked. "Your oats?" "Yes, Paps says they make me stronger and healthier. A soft, shaky laugh escaped her. That's very kind, but you still need to eat yours too. Or were you planning to skip breakfast, Eri-chan? Eri froze, eyes widening as she realized she had been caught, glancing at DABI before lowering her voice. No, it's for the beautiful lady, so she gets better, not because I want to skip them. I see. Fuyumi said gently, reaching out to ruffle her hair. You are very thoughtful, Eri-chan. Hee, thanks. Across the room, Rumi watched while stretching, sharing a brief, knowing glance with DABI. Fine. DABI muttered, the edge gone from his voice. Sit down and eat before the brave schoolteacher starts crying into the pork. Dinner passed quietly, marked more by the soft clink of chopsticks than conversation, though the silence lacked its usual sharpness. By the end, Fuyumi looked more at ease than she had in years, even if DABI still couldn't hold her gaze for more than a second. Eri had climbed onto the dining table, giggling as Fuyumi tickled her until she was breathless, while Rumi lay sprawled on the couch, completely out, unmoving as a rock. DABI finished his work, stepped away, and returned from the bedroom with a blanket, draping it over her before turning back. Huh. Eri suddenly went still, thinking hard, her expression only making her look cuter. What is it, Eri-chan? Fuyumi asked gently, her instincts as a teacher showing. You. Eri pointed at her. Our Papa's little sister. Yes. Fuyumi nodded, briefly glancing at DABI. And the lady in the hospital is your mama. Correct. Eri rubbed her chin, deep in thought. That means she is also Papa's mama. DABI, already heading toward the bedroom, slowed, eyes widening slightly as he caught the direction of the conversation. Then, what is Papa's mama to me? She pushed herself up, standing on the table as realization struck. Oh, Grandma. I have a grandma, she declared, beaming, eyes shining. She turned immediately. Papa, I have a grandma now. Shoo, DABI cut in, stepping forward and reaching for her. Mama is sleeping. Keep it down. Hey. Then he glanced at Fuyumi. It's past her bedtime too. Let her sleep and you too. No, I can't possibly stay over. Just stay. I mean, it's pretty late. And is Natsuo home? No, he isn't. His medical exams are close, so he is studying with friends. Good, DABI replied. Then go to bed. Class 1A classroom. Next morning, the classroom was talkative, still relishing in post-sports festival scenes and exhaustion. Aizawa stood at the lectern, looking even more sleep-deprived than usual, while DABI leaned against the back wall. I know you are all still nursing bruises from yesterday. Aizawa started, his voice a flat drone. But the world doesn't stop for recovery. Today, we are discussing your workplace experience program, otherwise known as internships. A digital map flickered onto the board, showing a tally of nominations from pro-hero agencies. The numbers are based on your performance at the festival, Aizawa continued. In previous years, it's been more spread out, but this year, well, the gap is significant. The screen flashed the results. Todoroki, 4,123. Bakugo, 3,556. Midoriya, 2,109. Tokoyami, 360. Ida, 301. The class erupted in hushed whispers. Midoriya stared at his own number, his mind already racing. Don't let the numbers go to your head. DABI's voice cut through the chatter. Most of these agencies aren't looking for heroes. They are looking for merchandise. They saw a flashy quirk and a pretty face on TV, and they want to use you to sell insurance or boost their social media following. He pushed off the wall, walking slowly toward the front of the room. If you pick an agency because they have a cool logo or a high rank, you are an idiot And for God's sake, don't waste your time. Aizawa let out a tired sigh. While his delivery is aggressive, he is not wrong. You have 2 days to submit your preferences. Choose wisely. The school day ended with a flurry of students discussing their offers. Shoto was among the last to leave, his mind preoccupied with the 4,000 agencies clamoring for him and the one specific offer from his father he had no intention of taking. Hey, half and half. Shoto stopped as DABI stood by the lockers holding the same tiered bento from last night, wrapped in blue cloth, saying nothing before tossing it over. Shoto caught it on instinct. Fuyumi left it, DABI said quietly. Take it back to wherever it came from. Understood. DABI waved it off, then paused, pulling a small crumpled paper bag from his pocket and tossing that too. Put this in the box too. Shoto checked inside. Oats. Oats. Just play along. My daughter thinks they are magic. DABI muttered, looking away. Tell Mom it's from you. Shoto nodded, knowing DABI was aware of his hospital visits since the sports festival. Toya. It's DABI. He cut in, eyes flashing. My apologies. Good. Now beat it. Can I ask you something? Shoto stepped closer, refusing to let the conversation die. DABI exhaled, irritated but stopping. What now? Why didn't you invite me for a work study? DABI let out a short, dry chuckle. Use your head. I don't have an agency. I am an assistant teacher, an underground asset. That's not it, Shoto said steadily. He had figured it out during the sports festival, thanks to a certain loudmouth. Even if DABI didn't have an agency on paper, he was closely tied to one. Enough that it might as well have been his, even if he wasn't an official member. Do you think I am not strong enough? That my fire isn't as powerful as yours? Yeah. DABI's hand slipped back into his pocket with a sharp motion. That's exactly it. You are weak. You are still fighting with half a heart and carrying your father's baggage. He straightened, gaze hard. Take the box and go. You're wasting my time. He turned, took a step, then paused and glanced back. And Shoto? Go somewhere no one cares who your father is, and no one knows who your brother was. Figure out who you are. Next day, Shoto stood in the quiet, sun-drenched room of the hospital. His mother, Rei, sat by the window, a book resting in her lap. She looked up as he entered, her face brightening with a gentle, fragile smile. Shoto, she whispered, you are here. I brought something, Shoto said, stepping forward. He set the re-wrapped bento box on the table and pulled out the small, crumpled bag. Fuyumi sent the food, and this is from me. He is really bad at lies. It's been a whole week after the sports festival. UA had settled back into the regular grind. Classes ran on schedule, and the first years had moved on to hero information studies, specifically picking their hero names. Midnight and Aizawa were handling that one. DABI was in the faculty room. He was sitting in his chair with his legs up on his desk and his mask off, head tipped back, eyes closed. Eri was curled against his chest with her face pressed into his shirt, completely out. Her breathing had that slow, heavy quality little kids get when they are deep enough under that you could probably set off fireworks and they would just roll over. Here. Cementos came in through the side door and went straight to All Might's desk. A new nomination had come through specifically for a first-year student, Izuku Midoriya. Unlike in the show, where Izuku keeps breaking his body to use his quirk, here he has learned full cowl and doesn't injure himself nearly as often. Because of that, he receives far more offers than he normally would. Thank you, Cementos. All Might perked up and pulled up the file with clear satisfaction until his expression shifted into something more complicated when he saw the name attached to the nomination. He walked back to his seat, a bit defeated. DABI, who had not opened his eyes through any of the proceedings, said, It's night, All Might looked at him. Yeah. He rubbed his face with one bony hand. My old friend, Mirai Sasaki Sir Night Eye, of all the people Ha. The laugh that came out was thin and didn't have any humor in it. I should have expected this, shouldn't I? What are you thinking of doing? Well, that's the thing. I haven't quite... it could be a genuine... So you don't want to send the kid to him. DABI, it isn't about my willingness. All Might's voice dropped a register. You are well aware that the reason behind this nomination might not be to help Midoriya. DABI opened his eyes and looked at All Might for a long moment. True, he understood. Night Eye had spent years urging All Might to retire, warning that his body couldn't endure much longer and that the clock was running out. All Might refused to listen. Then, instead of passing one for all to the successor Night Eye had carefully identified, he gave it to a quirkless kid named Izuka Midoriya, someone with zero combat experience at the time and a habit of crying whenever people were kind to him. In Night Eye's eyes, Midoriya was the wrong choice. So it's the old man then? DABI said. The only person he ever called that was Gran Torino. Yes, I think so. All Might said, straightening as he latched onto the idea. Master Gran Torino trained me, and if anyone can help Midoriya understand one for all at a fundamental level, it's him. The boy could learn a great deal there. That pile of bones has nothing to teach. DABI muttered, shifting Eri's weight slightly so she wouldn't slide. And let's not even get into his memory. I honestly can't tell if he is faking it or not because he apparently doesn't remember me at all. But he remembers Eri just fine. He smoothed a hand over Eri's head. She remained still. All Might fell silent, thinking it through. Gran Torino was getting old, and asking him to take on a student now to train Midoriya in something this important. And his agency? DABI added, clearly not finished. It's not even a proper building, just an old house, no matter how much he renovates it, with bad plumbing and a kitchen that reeks of taiyaki grease. I have told him to move in with me, but he won't budge, he said, keeping his voice low and his body still so he wouldn't disturb Eri. All Might sighed, clearly at a loss, until his expression shifted, that familiar hopeful look forming, the kind that usually preceded a terrible idea, as he turned to DABI and met his gaze in silence. DABI shook his head. Nope. Never. Now hold on. Just hear me out for a moment. I don't have an agency, he repeated, using the same excuse he had given Shoto. All Might deflated further, somehow managing it even in his gaunt form. That's true, but it would have been a tremendous help for young Midoriya, he added, scratching his jaw. Working alongside someone of your caliber and your team, I believe the boy would have flourished. The team he meant was Stain, Spinner, Twice, La Brava, and Gentle, running an agency that Stain had set up and DABI had deliberately kept his name off of. He worked with them when necessary, though officially he wasn't part of it, which raised the obvious question of how DABI actually supported himself if he didn't have an agency or a regular hero gig. He still needs money to buy food and be roofed on top of his head. Well, if you didn't know, working as an underground hero isn't all that bad. It actually pays better than most public hero work. Even now, being an assistant teacher at UA wasn't a position to underestimate financially, and beyond that, Rumi herself was the number 5 hero in Japan. She earned more than enough for 2 adults and a small child who mostly ate rice and fruit and the occasional ice cream cone if she had been particularly well behaved at the grocery store. So yeah, his retirement plan is going well with no breaks. Unless he and Rumi suddenly decide they want kids, which obviously they don't as of now. Maybe once the plot finishes. He had drifted far off the original topic, and while sending Midoriya to Stain didn't sound like the worst idea, that unruly group wasn't exactly suited to teaching something like this. Just send him to Night Eye, DABI said. All Might looked at him, too. They are both nerds, perfectly suited for each other. DABI said, adjusting Eri and tucking her head more securely under his chin. And honestly, setting aside their shared obsession with you, Night Eye could actually help him with one for all. Get him ready for what's coming. He is smart and so Midoriya. Let them figure it out together. Though before any of that, the kid needs Nitai's acknowledgement. And you are seriously saying you can't trust Midoriya with something that simple? All Might nodded, though the look on his face suggested he was still deep in his own thoughts as the faculty room door opened and Aizawa and Midnight walked in looking like they'd just survived something. Midnight headed straight for Dabi's desk, already reaching out. Come on. Give me sweet Eri. I need to recharge. I am running on empty. She is sleeping, Dabi said, angling his shoulder away. Don't wake her. And how did it go? He added. The naming session seemed productive. Midnight made a noise that could only be described as spiritual exhaustion. These problem children are something else, especially Bakugo. Dabi grinned. Well, yeah. I would have put money on him not being able to come up with a hero name that didn't use the words explosion, murder, and kill in some combination. Don't laugh. Aizawa dropped into his chair. He looked like he had aged a year in 45 minutes. It's not funny, and as an assistant teacher, you always dump the most annoying things on me. That's what assistants do. They assist by not being there. He added, but yeah, don't worry about Bakugo. I will have someone else straighten him out. Then what about your brother? Midnight asked. Her voice had that particular tone people used when they were trying to describe something they still hadn't fully processed. Shoto, how was he even... does he have any social skills at all? Any? Even basic ones? The things a person needs to just, exist in a room with other people. Dabi could guess what had happened. Shoto had probably just written his own first name on the board and sat back down. Well, Dabi said, can't really blame me for that one. The faculty room door slammed open. Present Mike stood in the doorway, one hand on the handle at full volume. Wait, Shoto Todoroki is Dabi's brother. He drew in a breath to continue, then stopped. Every head in the room had turned toward him at once. Midnight, Aizawa, All Might, Dabi. All wearing the same precise irritation of people whose quiet had just been shattered. Because the little girl on Dabi's chest had woken. Eri lifted her head, one eye scrunched. A small hand pressed to her ear while the other clutched his jacket, looking confused, unhappy, and seconds from tears. Mick's mouth stayed open, but nothing came out as his gaze flicked from Eri to the four adults and back again. The workplace experience program went satisfyingly. Unlike the original timeline, where Dabi vaguely remembered things going sideways in about 4 different directions at once, this time he had made sure every student landed somewhere that actually fit them. He spent hours going through agency offers, cross-referencing quirk types, personality profiles, combat styles, and learning their needs. It was boring, tedious work, and he did it anyway. Maybe I am not a terrible teacher for once. Coming back, there were few placements he was particularly careful about. Yairozu went to the agency of the Dragoon hero, Ryuko Tatsuma, which specialized in team coordination and large-scale rescue missions. Her creation quirk and strategic thinking were valued there rather than overshadowed. Much better than wasting time at the snake hero Iwabami's workplace. Kirishima trained under Fourth Kind, a hero known for discipline, defense, and a strong work ethic. As a martial arts type hero, Fourth Kind's close-range combat style fit perfectly with Kirishima's hardening quirk. Tokoyami worked with Hawk's agency. Every placement had been carefully considered, and things were going well. Which was precisely why Dabi knew something would eventually go wrong. Meanwhile, in the Osaka region, Bakugo and Shoto were at the hero agency of Stain. Red Justice Agency. Red Justice being Stain's hero name, which Dabi still thought sounded like a knockoff energy drink, but had long since stopped bringing up. Right now, Bakugo was face down on the training room floor with Stain sitting on top of him. Just sitting there, cross-legged, like Bakugo was a particularly loud piece of furniture. Shoto stood off to the side, watching, and unlike Kanon, he hadn't gone to Endeavor's agency. Get the hell off me, you bastard! Bakugo snarled, face pressed into the mat with both arms pinned as he thrashed uselessly. You hear me? I will kill you. I swear to God I will. Move. Kill me, he says. Spinner leaned against the far wall with his arms crossed. Yeah, real heroic. Oi, DABI. Stain didn't raise his voice. He turned his head toward the other side of the room, where DABI was on the floor doing push-ups with what looked like an unreasonable amount of weight stacked on his back. You truly wish for someone like this to walk freely through society? Beside DABI, Twice was crouched down, counting reps. 47. No, wait. 32. You're killing it, boss. This is painful to watch. DABI didn't answer Stain, he just kept going. Stain waited a second, then stood up off Bakugo in one clean motion and looked down at him. All right, you want to kill me so bad, he said, dragging a finger lightly along the blade's edge, just enough to split the skin into a thin red line. Go ahead, get up. Bakugo pushed himself up and barely took a step before his knees buckled, dropping him hard as he caught himself with his hands while crushing pressure closed in from every direction, forcing him into the pavement, worse than the weight training DABI had put him through before the sports festival. Harder he pushed against it, the heavier it became, as if the weight responded to his effort and punished him for it. Shoto stood off to the side, silent and unmoving, his eyes shifting from Bakugo to Stain, then briefly to DABI, still doing push-ups as if none of it concerned him. Gentle appeared to be practicing poses while La Brava filmed him, neither of them particularly bothered by the hostage situation unfolding 10 feet away. Shoto watched it all and briefly wondered whether coming here had been a mistake, but the thought vanished within seconds. Bakugo being placed with Stain had DABI written all over it. He couldn't officially choose internships for his students, but influencing someone desperate for power? That was easy, and pairing two extremists on opposite ends of the same question was far too tempting for him to leave alone. What a hero should be. What a hero absolutely should not be. A kid who screamed about murder every time he got frustrated was placed under the supervision of a man who had the capability to hunt down heroes he deemed unworthy and had very strong feelings about what those words actually meant. It was either going to work brilliantly or end in a fistfight. DABI finished his set, stood up, and checked something on a screen only he could see. Genetic milestone system, 3 evolution paths, breath of the sun, 100 out of 100% check. Super soldier, 100% check completed. Arachnid genome, Air 22 to 30, out of 100%. Lifespan left, 119 plus years. DABI gained an additional 10 more from the rest days and training alone, while the arachnid genome continued developing each time he pushed his body past its limits, something he hadn't neglected. He pulled on his shirt and started walking toward the door. Stain! He didn't turn around. Don't go overboard with them. On his way out, he paused beside Shoto. For a long moment, he just looked at his younger brother, the masterpiece who looked remarkably out of place in a room full of societal rejects. I still don't get why the hell you picked this place. DABI scratched the side of his jaw. But since you are here, shut up and focus on getting stronger. That's it. Don't think of anything else. The irony wasn't lost on DABI. He had told Shoto to find a place where no one knows who your brother was. But Shoto had done the exact opposite. Who should I blame, though? He wondered. He had explicitly told Twice to make sure Stain's invitation list didn't include the Todoroki name, but Twice's dual personality had apparently mishandled the memo. And even after that, he still couldn't pinpoint why Shoto accepted it. Hey boss, where are you going? Take me with you. Stay away from me. You are a terrible influence. Twice called out, his mask twitching as his voice battled for dominance. Got a student to check on, DABI muttered, glancing back at Stain, who currently had a knee pinned into Bakugo's spine. Teaching is a real hassle, and he was gone. The instant he left, Stain released his quirk, the pressure lifting as Bakugo sprang to his feet, his palms already popping with the acrid scent of nitroglycerin. That's it. His face twisted in a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. You're dead. You hear me? I will murder. Stain did not flinch or reach for his notched blades, or even shift into a defensive stance. He just looked at Katsuki Bakugo. Kid. And that one word was enough. Stain's eyes had that flat, cold quality, like a door that opened onto something you really didn't want to see the other side of. The bloodlust radiating from him was almost visible, a tangible pressure that thickened the air and filled the room, leaving Spinner rigid, La Brava lowering her camera, Gentle going still, and even twice falling silent, the most alarming sign of all. 6 feet away, Shoto felt the hair on the back of his neck stand up. You want to finish that sentence? Bakugo's mouth was still open, but nothing came out. No? Then hear me out, Stain said, stepping closer. Every time you open your mouth, it's kill this, murder that. You say those words like they're cheap, like they are just empty noise you throw out when you are throwing a tantrum. He took another step, invading Bakugo's personal space. Do you have any idea what they actually cost when someone means them? Bakugo didn't move. His hands were still raised, sparks still fizzling weakly between his fingers, but his feet refused to follow his brain's command to attack. Every survival instinct he possessed was screaming a single, panicked warning. Don't. WH. Bakugo's throat had gone dry. Stain was inches away now, looking straight down into Bakugo's wide, trembling pupils. So here is the deal. Stain's voice dropped to a whisper that felt sharper than any blade. You and me, right now. A death match where only one of us walks out the door. That's what you want, isn't it? That's what you just screamed. I'm ready when you are. Everyone in the room felt it, Bakugo most of all. This wasn't a bluff or something silly as intimidation for the sake of theater. The man standing in front of him would actually do it, or he had done worse to people who probably deserved it less. You don't have the stomach for it? Then stop saying it. It's that simple. Stain hadn't so much as blinked. Because of me, I am not like you. I don't throw those words around to feel tough. I have put people in the ground, kid. People who talked exactly the way you do. Heroes who thought wearing the title meant they could say whatever they wanted without it meaning anything. A villain in a hero's skin. Pause. So I will ask you one more time. Are you taking it back? Or are we doing this? Bakugo's palms had gone deathly still. His jaw clenched hard enough to strain his neck. Looking like a kid who had reached the edge of something real and was staring straight down. Villain, Bakugo said, the word barely more than a raw, scraped whisper. Ha! I said. Bakugo's voice cracked back to life, shaking and furious. Don't you ever compare me to... I am not a villain. I am nothing like them. Who the hell do you think you are talking to? He didn't finish the word cleanly. His eyes burned with something deeper, harder, and more painfully honest than his usual bravado. This time he meant it down to his bones. Stain studied him for another long, silent second, searching for a flicker of a lie. He didn't find one. Then he stepped back, 1, 2, 3 paces, his posture easing as the suffocating pressure lifted and everyone could breathe again. Stain rolled his neck. All right, you get to live. La Brava let out a breath she had been holding for about 45 seconds. Gentle unclenched his hands and twice whispered. That was the scariest thing I have ever seen. Can we do it again? But next time, Stain added, voice steady as he looked back at Bakugo. If those words leave your mouth and you don't mean every syllable, we are done talking. Understood. Without waiting for a response, he crossed the room toward Shoto. The younger Todoroki stood pale, as if several fundamental assumptions about his world had just been quietly rewritten. Now, Stain studied him for a second. Your turn. DABI didn't push you on this 'cause that's how he is, but I am not him. He crossed his arms. Why did you come here? And don't give me the getting stronger line. I already heard that part. Shoto met his gaze, his voice flat and even as ever. But this time there was a half-second pause before he spoke. One that hadn't been there before. Getting stronger is the first reason. He paused. The second. His gaze dropped to his hands for a moment, then lifted again. I am here to leave him behind, Shoto stated. And that was it, nothing more, no name spoken. Yet everyone in the room understood, except for Twice, that is. Deep down, buried under layers of stoicism and ice, was a truth Shoto rarely admitted even to himself. He was jealous. Despite knowing how much suffering DABI had to go through to reach where he was, Shoto Todoroki was in fact jealous of what his brother had achieved. He suffered, yes, but he also won. He successfully clawed his way away from their father and became something on his own. He respects him for the achievement, and yet at the same time he couldn't help but want the same. Stain immediately understood that. Ah, is that what you think you are doing? Stain stepped closer, his long, tattered scarf swaying like a serpent. You say you want to escape his shadow, yet here you are, standing in another man's. You didn't choose a path, boy. Shoto's eyes widened slightly. You traded the number 2 for the underground ghost. Stain hissed, leaning in until his nose nearly touched Shoto's. You are still just a kid looking for someone to tell him how to stand. If DABI tells you to jump, you jump because you think it's freedom just because it isn't Endeavor's way. But it's still his way, isn't it? You just switched masters. Stain uncrossed his arms, his lip curling in a sneer. If you're here to find yourself through DABI, you've already failed. He doesn't want followers or shadows. He wants a hero who can think for themselves. Shoto held his gaze, but the frost along his right side thickened, a visible strain of his inner conflict, as he remained without an answer. Stain looked between them, the boy who had just been forced to confront his own hypocrisy, and Bakugo, who was still staring at his hands in the corner. He thought back to DABI's weary remark on his way out the door. Yeah, teaching is a real hassle. Wrapping up a few more proceedings on his way, DABI was moving again, intent on finding a certain winged hero, Hawks, whose agency was based in Kyushu near Fukuoka. He was currently in Osaka, where Stain's Red Justice Agency operated and where, coincidentally, Naitai's office was also located. The distance between Osaka and Fukuoka was roughly 500 kilometers, taking about 3.5 to 4 hours by bullet train or around 90 minutes by air. The question was why he actually had to go at all. Yeah, I am on my way to get the autograph, Miss Airy, with a photo of your favorite hero. DABI held his phone between his ear and his shoulder. When he said the word favorite, the corner of his mouth twitched. The little girl on the other end sounded like she was bouncing off the walls. Thank you, Papa. You're the best. You're really going to get it. You've really figured out how to make people do whatever you want, haven't you? Hehe. Big sis Fuyumi taught me well. DABI sighed through his nose. He was being pulled back into everything he had spent years avoiding, and it was becoming clear there was no way out. Also, Papa. Her voice got smaller the way it did when she was being serious. Take care, okay? And, safe travels. Don't worry about me. I will be back home without a scratch. You promise? I promise. The call ended. While that was the main reason for his visit, he also hadn't been lying when he told Stain he needed to check on his student. As he continued down the thoroughfare, he looked around. Billboards lined the street, and the sidewalks were occupied by kids everywhere, running around with stuffed toy versions of pro heroes and dragging their parents towards their favorite posters. One kid was hugging a Hawks plushie to his chest like it was the most important object in the world. DABI looked at it. What's so great about being the number 3 hero? He muttered. I could have that overgrown pigeon on the ground in one move. But before any of that, He had to survive a 1-hour flight. Anything for the little princess. Hopefully he wouldn't throw up halfway there. The Night Eye Agency. So you're Midoriya? From Class 1A? Yes. And you're... Midoriya looked at the older student standing in front of him, clearly trying to place his face and coming up empty. I am sorry, I don't think we've... I am also from UA 3rd year. Midoriya's brain caught up about half a second later. His spine went ramrod straight, and he threw himself into a bow so fast he nearly headbutted his own knees. You're our senior? I am so sorry for not recognizing you. That's so rude of me. I should have... Whoa. Easy. The guy held up both hands, laughing, his face going a little pink. You're fine. Seriously, there is no way you would recognize me if we had never met. Don't worry about it. He scratched the back of his head. Come on, let's get moving. Sir's not really the type who likes it when people show up late. They started walking, and the older student turned to him with a grin that stretched across most of his face. Right, I guess I should start with a proper introduction. My name is Mirio Togata, also known as the comedy hero Lemillion. I am in Class 3B at UA. Midoriya stopped walking. Wait! Hold on a second, Togata. Lemillion? You're one of the big three. Oh my god. That's incredible. I have heard so much about... Mirio laughed again, louder this time, rubbing the back of his neck. Man, you're gonna make me blush for real. Cut it out. Sorry, I can't believe I am actually meeting one of the... You know what, Midoriya? I think I already like you. Mirio clapped him on the shoulder hard enough to make him stumble. You are a good kid. I can tell. They reached the entrance to Nightai's office. A woman was waiting near the front, blue-skinned, with professional posture, and a look on her face that said she was used to managing things that didn't want to be managed. Lemillion. She gave Mirio a look. You're awfully cheerful today, even for you. Am I? Haha, I guess so. Hey, is Sir inside? She nodded. He is in his office. And this is the new intern? Midoriya stiffened up so fast his heels practically clicked together. Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much for having me here. I will do my absolute best to. Bubble Girl held up a hand, smiling a little. You're polite. That's good. But you might want to head in now if you don't want to begin on the wrong foot, because he is already waiting. She turned to Mirio. Sir said you can head out on patrol once you've dropped him off. Roger that. Mirio turned to Midoriya and gave him a thumbs up. Hey, you will be great in there. Don't overthink it, okay? Just be yourself. Thank you, Togata. And good luck on your patrol. Stay safe out there. See you around, Midoriya. Mirio was already jogging away, waving over his shoulder. Midoriya took a breath, then another one, and he went inside. Sir Night Eye sat behind his desk, reviewing paperwork without looking up as the door opened or when Midoriya stepped in and stopped before him. Only after finishing the page and setting it aside did he raise his gaze, studying Midoriya like a problem already solved, with a result he found disappointing. I wasn't wrong about you, Night Eye said. You don't have what it takes to wield one for all. 2 months ago, they would have knocked the air from Midoriya's lungs, leaving him flinching, stuttering, and scrambling to defend a worthiness he barely felt. But now, he didn't even blink. DABI was worse. DABI said things to your face with a jagged, zero-hesitation cruelty that didn't soften a single syllable. And then there was Rumi, who had told Midoriya the exact same thing Night Eye had just said, except she had been eating an apple at the time and hadn't even slowed down chewing. Compared to the underground ghost and the rabbit hero, this encounter was just a conversation. I am doing everything I can, Midoriya said. All Might trusted me with this, and I am. And if this is truly everything you're capable of, then it simply isn't enough. Night Eye said, his tone flat and clinical, as though he were reciting the outcome of an evaluation. All Might would have been better served choosing DABI, or even Lemillion, for that matter, as either of them would have been a far more suitable successor. Midoriya blinked. DABI-sensei? And Lemillion? Ah! Night Eye leaned back in his chair. So he never told you, which means you really believed you were the first candidate, that All Might simply saw you one day and made his decision on the spot. Midoriya didn't answer. His mouth opened, then snapped shut. Lemillion didn't know it at the time, but he was the prime choice. Night Eye continued, adjusting his frames. And as for DABI, he was offered one for all outright, and he refused it. He let that sit for a second. In my assessment, DABI was the most suitable candidate by a wide margin. This wasn't a blind claim. Night Eye had used his foresight on DABI once. The vision had been unusually unclear, more so than any he had ever experienced. Yet what little he could discern was undeniable. DABI would have become a hero of such magnitude that the term symbol of peace would have felt small, greater than All Might. And when Night Eye tried to recall the specific details, only blurred, grotesquely majestic images remained. A clash, perhaps not merely a fight, but two creators colliding. One wreathed in fire, its breath devouring everything in its path. And then, afterward, stillness and peace. Whatever lay in DABI's future, it was a horizon Night Eye had never seen before. It was a genuine waste that he refused the offer. Night Eye continued, folding his hands on the desk. If not him, then Lemillion. That was the intended course, and how matters should have proceeded, until you appeared unexpectedly and he cut himself off. Well, here we are. DABI-sensei refused one for all? Midoriya remained quiet. 1,000 thoughts collided in his head. He knew nothing of Lemillion beyond the last 15 minutes. But DABI? He has seen DABI almost every day for the past year. He trained under him, observing how he moved, thought, and handled threats with a terrifying, effortless efficiency. It made perfect sense. Of course, All Might had considered others. Candidates who, on paper and in practice, by every measurable standard, far surpassed a quirkless kid who couldn't even throw a punch without breaking his own bones. Why didn't I think about that before? Night Eye studied him, reading the boy's face for the telltale signs of a crumbling spirit. He saw the uncertainty and straightened slightly, a faint hint of vindication in his posture. Then Midoriya said, "It doesn't matter." "Excuse me?" Night Eye's eyebrows twitched. "I said it doesn't matter." Midoriya looked at him directly. Who was considered? Who was offered? Who turned it down? None of that changes the reality of right now. Because right now, I am the one holding it. His hands trembled, a visible, frantic vibration, and he made no move to hide it. All Might was fully aware there were stronger candidates, people like DABI-sensei or Togata-senpai, and he still chose me. I don't fully understand it, and maybe I never will, but I can't stand here chasing what-ifs when I already carry this power and people are depending on me to move forward, he said, swallowing hard before steadying himself. I have made my decision. I am going to become the greatest hero in the world, no matter what the odds are. Night Eye studied the boy before his desk, hands trembling, voice steady, and an expression far too stubborn for someone with his track record. You're cocky, Night Eye remarked, and you have absolutely no basis for it. I am well aware of my shortcomings. Fine. Night Eye reached for a pen on his desk and held it up between two fingers. Take the pen from my hand. If you can do that much, I will acknowledge your presence in this office. Midoriya looked at the pen and then at Night Eye. I don't need you to acknowledge me, he said, but I want you to acknowledge that All Might wasn't wrong. Night Eye's expression remained a mask of stone. He kept the pen aloft. In the next heartbeat, Midoriya moved. A blur of green laced with a crackling red edge, gone from where he had been standing before Night Eye could blink. The sonic pressure hit a half-second later, ruffling the papers on the desk and violently flipping the pages of the document Night Eye had been reading. The pen was no longer between his fingers. Until that exact millisecond, Night Eye hadn't used his quirk on Midoriya, relying instead on his own judgment, because if he had, he wouldn't have underestimated him to this extent. But the instant Midoriya said he would prove All Might wasn't wrong, Night Eye activated foresight, and by then it was already too late. He saw the frames play out in advance. Midoriya's knees bending, numbers slipping under his breath as the power climbed. 10, 15, 20, 25, layered with the same total concentration breathing DABI uses. Every frame played out before it happened, and still Night Eye couldn't react fast enough. Even if he had tried to adjust, moved the pen to his other hand, held it at a different angle, or shifted his grip, the result would have been the same. His quirk was passive. It showed him the future but didn't make his body fast enough to change it. A sharp crack echoed against the far wall. When the dust settled, Night Eye turned slowly in his chair. Midoriya was braced against the fractured plaster, the pen gripped tightly in his left hand. His right arm was trembling violently from pushing a percentage his muscles weren't ready for, and his knees were scraped raw from the high-velocity landing. But he was smiling. "I won," Midoriya said, holding up the pen. Night Eye's gaze shifted from the boy to the impact site on the wall. "At the last moment, you veered left in midair and threw off your trajectory, so I want to know why you made that adjustment." He cut himself off, as his gaze settled on what hung directly behind where Midoriya's shoulder would have struck. A vintage All Might poster, limited edition, hand-signed. Midoriya tilted his head, still breathing hard. "Sorry? Were you saying something?" Night Eye looked from the poster to the boy on the floor, who had cracked his wall, stolen his pen, and still veered midair at that speed to avoid damaging a piece of memorabilia. "Nothing," he said, and shook his head. "Absolutely nothing." Osaka City. Koji Koda was working with 13, the space hero, specialized in rescue, disaster relief, and evacuation, perfect for someone with Koda's animal communication quirk. Today's operation was a fire rescue. A small apartment building had caught fire, and a child was reported trapped on the 3rd floor. "Koda," 13's calm voice came through his earpiece. "The smoke is too dense for our infrared sensors, so can your friends help us pinpoint the room?" Koda nodded frantically, then remembered she couldn't see him through the smoke. "Yes. On it." He cupped his hands, letting out a low, melodic whistle, and a small bird, a sparrow, flew into the building through a broken window. Minutes later, it returned, chirping directions. The rescue was successful. The firefighters, guided by Koda's avian scout, extracted the child, and the family was reunited with everyone safe. But amidst the celebration, Koda's Ani voice had caught a discordant frequency. Beneath the building, through the cracks in the pavement, he heard it. The high-pitched, panicked screams of rats. Is it due to fire panic? He thought, but it seemed like something else lurking in the sub-basement. Koda opened his mouth to speak to 13. He looked at her towering, heroic silhouette, then looked at the busy paramedics. What if he was wrong? What if I am just sensitive? What if I am wasting the time of a top hero for some rodents? His social anxiety won out. He said nothing as they returned to base with the sun setting. Night fell over Osaka, but Koda's mind wouldn't let it go. Those cries kept echoing in his mind. While 13 retired to her hotel to file reports, his conscience gnawed at him until he couldn't sit still. He returned alone, following the directions of the local bird population. They led him around the back, down an alley, to a basement entrance that shouldn't have been on the blueprints. The animal's cries were intense now. He stood in front of a reinforced door that clearly didn't belong to the original structure. As Koda reached for his phone to dial the emergency line, a shadow detached itself from the brickwork. A massive, calloused hand clamped over his mouth. Well, a rough voice said. Look at the little mouse poking around the trap. Kota tried to scream, but a rag soaked in a sweet, chemical rot was pressed against his face. The world tilted and went dark. When Kota regained consciousness, he was in a small concrete room lit by a single bulb, his hands zip-tied. Beyond the heavy door, muffled voices rose in a heated argument. Can't just kill a UA Bart. Do you have any idea what kind of heat that would bring down on us? Then what's your plan? Just let him walk out of here so he can report our location? More importantly, we can't let Jiren catch wind of this at all. He made it very clear that no third parties were to be involved, so the kid stays here with us until the operation begins tonight. A chilling, wet chuckle followed. He will be dead the moment the Nomu are unleashed, so it hardly matters. Can't testify if there's nothing left but a stain on the ground, right? Nomu, the word sent ice through Kota's veins. He had seen what those creatures were capable of at USJ, and these men were planning to let them loose in the middle of a crowded civilian district. He had to warn someone, his quirk. Ani voice, Kota tried to reach out to the nearby life source. After an agonizing silence, he heard a scratching in the ceiling vents. 3 crows, their eyes shimmering like black glass, hopped down and landed silently on the floor beside him. He thought quickly, who could he call? Would anyone take a crow's cawing seriously? And worse, wouldn't following it only put them in danger? Then he remembered the look in Midoriya's eyes during the USJ and the way Bakugo never backed down from a fight, no matter the odds. Please, he whispered as quietly as he could. Can you find my classmates and lead them to where I am? The crows understood. 2 slipped back through the vent while the third remained, perched on a pipe like a silent guardian. Now all Kota could do was wait and hope his message reached the right hands. Osaka District, Night Eye Agency Exterior. Izuka Midoriya stood in the courtyard, practicing full cowling in the dark. Everyone else had gone to bed hours ago, but sleep wouldn't come. Night Eye had begun to acknowledge him, slightly, and the restless energy in his body refused to settle. 10%. 15. He pushed toward 20, testing the limit without breaking himself. A crow dropped from the sky, landing heavily on the metal railing beside him, cawing urgently. Ha! Midoriya powered down, the green sparks fading. He turned toward the bird, squinting. A bird! Immediately, an image of his classmate popped up. Wait, I recognize you're one of Kota's friends, aren't you? The crow cawed again, sharper, hopping away and back before moving off once more. Follow me. Midoriya's posture tightened, instincts locking in. Something's wrong. Okay? I am coming. Same time Red Justice Agency dorms. Katsuki Bakugo was currently vibrating with a very specific, murderous brand of retail therapy, staring at the ceiling from the floor of his room. At this point, it wasn't by choice. The hero Stain, whom DABI had recommended as the best, with a trust me smile, had deemed his violent sleeping posture unacceptable and mandated floor sleeping as part of his rehabilitation program. Something about discipline and control. Ridiculous. Bakugo muttered into his pillow. Top, top, top. A crow hammered at his window, relentless and aggressively, like something on a mission. The hell? Bakugo sat up, eyes narrowed into slits. It's 2 a.m, you flying rat. Get lost. Top, 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 top. I am gonna roast you into a nugget. Bakugo stomped to the window, his hand already smoking as he prepared to incinerate the pest. But the moment he cracked the glass, the bird dived inside, landed squarely on his shoulder, and let out a caw that nearly burst his eardrum. Ow! You piece of dash! The crow grabbed a lock of his ash-blonde hair in its beak and pulled with surprising force, then banked toward the door. It circled back, snatched his hair again, and yanked. Bakugo's eyes narrowed as he muttered, That's one of the shy kid's birds. Bakugo didn't waste another second. He was already pulling on his gauntlets and grabbing his phone, his face setting into a mask of grim determination as he vaulted out the window after the black blur. 10 minutes later, the warehouse district, Midoriya rounded a corner, following his crow guide, and nearly collided with Bakugo and Shoto, who were following behind. "What the hell are you doing here, DKU?" Bakugo shouted. "Shoo, keep it down." Midoriya waved his hands frantically, his eyes darting to the shadows. "One of Koda's birds led me straight here, and something's definitely wrong, Kaken. I have got one of those annoying birds nagging me too." Bakugo's palms sparked. "So where the hell is that animal-talking idiot?" "I don't know. The bird just keeps leading me toward that basement entrance." "What happened?" Bakugo asked as Midoriya was looking behind him. Todoroki stepped out of the shadows, his hero costume on, frost forming around his right side. Half and half. "What the hell are you doing here?" Bakugo barked, irritation flaring instantly. "I followed you," Todoroki replied evenly. "You leaving at this hour was suspicious. Looks like I was right. Whether you like it or not, Midoriya is still our classmate." "No shit, Sherlock," Bakugo muttered, though he didn't move to shove Todoroki away. "The bird brought me here, same as the nerd." Midoriya quickly explained, urgency tightening his voice. "Did you inform anyone else?" Todoroki asked, glancing at the circling crows. "Hey, are you both ignoring me?" Bakugo snapped. "No," Midoriya said, his focus absolute. "I didn't want to raise a false alarm without confirmation. But if all of us were led to the same basement..." He looked between the two strongest fighters in his class. "This cannot be considered a coincidence anymore. We should call the pros," Todoroki said, reaching for his transceiver. "If this is serious..." Boom! An explosion tore through the street. It wasn't close enough to throw them, but the ground shuddered, and a low-frequency shockwave rattled the windows of the surrounding warehouses. Flames began erupting a few blocks away, and the crows flew into a frantic, screaming cloud. "That's where they are leading us," Midoriya said. "Forget calling for backup." Bakugo growled, his boots already sparking as he pivoted toward the smoke. "I am going in now, whether you're ready or not." "Wait," Midoriya pulled out his phone. "I am sending our location to someone, just in case." He pocketed it, energy surging through his body as full cowling activated. "Let's move." All three took off toward the flames. The hidden facility sub-level 2. Inside the concrete bunker, the air was thick with panic and the smell of scorched insulation. "The explosion went off early," a villain screamed, clutching a detonator. "Forget the schedule. Release the Nomu now. Open the tanks. What about the UA kid in the back? Leave him. We need to evacuate before the pros swarm the ward." The door burst open. Midoriya, Bakugo, and Todoroki stormed in, their entrance creating immediate chaos. The villains tried to fight back but found themselves hopelessly outmatched. Midoriya's enhanced speed dropped 3 villains before they could react. Bakugo's explosions took out 2 more, and Todoroki's ice locked down the rest. Within minutes, the room was silent, the low-tier thugs groaning in the frost. "Koda!" Midoriya found him in the side room, still zip-tied but conscious. "Are you okay?" Midoriya. Koda's eyes were wide with relief and fear. "There are." They said Nomu. Midoriya's eyes widened. At the far end of the facility, a door tore off its hinges as 2 Nomu emerged. One massive, grotesquely built yet fast despite its bulk. The other thin and skeletal, moving with inhuman speed. "Oh hell," Bakugo muttered. The thin Nomu vanished. Where did it? It reappeared in Todoroki's blind spot, a jagged strike sending the boy crashing through a reinforced cinder block wall. "Todoroki!" Midoriya surged to 20% and launched forward. only to be intercepted midair by the larger Nomu. The impact was like slamming into solid concrete, his durability barely holding. Bakugo blasted in, his largest explosion yet aimed at the creature's head. Get away from them! The thin one dodged every explosion. The larger one simply tanked the heat without flinching. Within seconds, the 3 top students of Class 1A were grounded, the facility floor cracking beneath them. Kota watched in horror, still too weak to move, his gentle nature making this violence even more traumatic. But even beaten and hurt, the 3 students pushed themselves to their feet. Midoriya's arm was definitely broken, but he managed to stand. Bakugo's shoulder also seems dislocated, though he just popped it back in with a grunt and stood back. Todoroki had a gash across his forehead and blood in his eyes. He wasn't down to begin with. Guys, when we were on our way here, Midoriya managed between strained breaths, his vision starting to blur. I saw an orphanage just a block away, and if those things make it out into the street, we won't be able to stop what happens next. Obviously, Bakugo snarled, spitting blood onto the concrete. You think I don't already know that, Deku? I agree, Todoroki said, the air around him beginning to steam as his temperatures clashed. We hold them here and don't let a single one through. They had seen this scenario before at USJ. DABI had fought 2 Nomu until he was barely alive, showing them what true heroism meant. Standing when everything said to fall and fighting when logic said to run. And these kids were his students. The Nomu attacked again, and 3 students, trained by the best teacher at UA, stood their ground and fought back, even without a chance of winning, because that's what heroes do. Fight was going poorly from the start. Midoriya engaged the thin Nomu, Bakugo took the larger one, and Todoroki supported from the rear, yet within seconds it was clear, 3 against 2, and they were losing. Midoriya kept full cowling at 20%, pushing higher when needed and brushing 30 in brief bursts whenever the thin Nomu closed in. But even that didn't work, the thing was faster. Every time he lined up a hit, committed to the motion, planted his foot and threw the punch, the Nomu simply wasn't there, blurring sideways or vanishing altogether and reappearing meters away as if the space between never existed. Even as he was getting beaten to hell, his mind kept working. This was a speed type with layered quirks, reflex enhancement over raw acceleration, maybe even boosted perception because it moved as if it anticipated events before they unfolded. The Nomu's fist caught him in the ribs. Something cracked. Midoriya used the momentum to roll, came up on one knee, coughed, and there was blood on the concrete in front of him. Across the room, Bakugo was doing better against the fat one. At least his hits were landing. Every explosion connected solid, and each blast was strong enough that the building's foundations shook and dust rained from the ceiling joints. But the larger Nomu didn't care, tanking every hit and keeping on advancing. Meanwhile, Todoroki supported from the rear using both ice and fire. During the rest days after the sports festival, and after a great deal of internal debate, he finally chose to stop hesitating and make the fire truly his. Ice surged from his right to create barriers and slow the thin Nomu's angles of attack, while fire from his left cut off escape routes and funneled the fat one into Bakugo's blast zones. Was it working? Barely. But running both quirks at once was still something his body wasn't used to, and he could feel his stamina draining faster than it should have. He threw up an ice wall between Midoriya and the thin Nomu, buying him a half-second of breathing room, then superheated the wall instantly. The temperature differential blew it apart into a steam explosion that filled half the room. The thin Nomu came through the steam without slowing down. For the first time, it ignored Midoriya, switched targets, and drove a fist into Todoroki's jaw. His vision went white. He hit the ground as the thin Nomu was already turning back toward Midoriya, having taken out their support in passing like swatting a fly on the way to a meal. The 3 of them scrambled back to the center of the room, forming a jagged triangle with Kota huddled trembling at the hub. All of them were bleeding, and whatever plan they thought they had was already slipping away. The two Nomu circled, the thin one tracking Midoriya with blank, lifeless eyes, the larger one rolling its shoulders as it faced Bakugo. Todoroki spat blood to the side. If we have any room to maneuver, we need to reposition now, because we're not dealing enough damage and we can't keep up with their reaction time. And if this keeps up, we're going to get overwhelmed. Ha! Bakugo's hands were sparking even though his palms were raw. Pull back where, half and half? You think now is the moment to run, because if you want out, then go. But I'm not moving an inch, and I will take both of them on myself. I am not telling you to run. I am saying we need a strategy that actually works instead of throwing ourselves at them blindly. Here's your plan. I kill them before they kill us. Shoto's eyes widened slightly. After Stain's warning, Bakugo had stopped throwing around words like kill. It had only taken one confrontation, but it had sunk deep. So if he was saying it now, he was serious. That's not. You can't just charge in like that. Kakin, Todoroki, just listen to me for a second. Midoriya wheezed, and the wheeze turned into a cough that bent him double. His broken ribs made every breath feel like someone was twisting a knife between his lungs. Just hold on, all right? I managed to get a message out to Dabi-sensei. He's on his way, so we just need to buy a little more time and then... The thin Nomu vanished and reappeared behind Midoriya, seizing his already broken arm and twisting. The sound that tore from him wasn't a shout or a yell, but an involuntary scream. DKU! Bakugo broke away from the fat one without thinking. Explosions flaring white-hot, trying to reach Midoriya, but the fat Nomu stepped into his path, and Bakugo couldn't get around it. The fight was a slaughter. There wasn't a better word for it. Midoriya's full cowling flickered and surged as he pushed it higher than he had ever tried. 30. The thin Nomu was still a ghost, moving according to a set of physics that ignored momentum and friction. It appeared and disappeared faster than Izuku's eyes could register the motion. He snarled, his teeth bared and stained red. 35. His muscles locked in protest as microfractures formed, tiny structural failures spreading through his bones like cracks in ice. The thin Nomu drove a localized, high-velocity fist into his solar plexus, launching him clean off his feet and crashing through a concrete wall into the next room. Midoriya hit the ground hard, coughing blood as his vision swam and threatened to fade, each breath cutting like a knife. But he got up soon again. 40-something in his arm cracked, loud and sharp, the pain shooting to his shoulder, but he didn't stop. Back in the main room, Bakugo was fighting the fat Nomu like something had come untethered inside him. His quirk had always pushed back against him. The more he used it, the more strain it put on his arms, the recoil stacking with every blast. Normally that was a limit. Right now it wasn't. The harder he fought, the more he sweated, nitroglycerin pooling in his palms, feeding his explosions and driving them stronger with every detonation. His hands bled from the recoil, skin splitting and peeling under repeated maximum output detonations. D. He wasn't thinking anymore. Something older and simpler had overridden whatever part of his brain handled tactics and timing and spatial awareness. Every explosion was powerful enough to level a building. Yet the larger Nomu absorbed them all, hit after hit, blasts that would have killed a normal person 10 times over, without slowing as it kept advancing. Bakugo's hands barely resembled hands anymore. His costume hanging in shreds as blood from his nose and ears, along with a gash across his forehead, streaked down his face, yet he didn't slow down. And beside him, Todoroki had finally stopped holding back. 2. He had given up trying to support both fights and was throwing everything he had at whatever was closest. Ice and fire erupted from him in massive, simultaneous surges, flash freezing the oxygen on his right while superheating the air on his left. The pressure differentials between the two extremes generated violent winds that ripped through the facility like a localized storm system. His right side was encased in frost thick enough to resemble plate armor, while his left burned so intensely that his costume charred and curled away from his skin. He threw up an ice wall to block the thin Nomu as it chased Midoriya through the breach, but it tore through like paper. Flames followed toward the larger one to give Bakugo space, yet it walked through without flinching. His body was failing even with both quirks active. The sheer output was overwhelming his thermoregulation, his core temperature destabilizing beyond what his body could correct, pushing his organs toward collapse. He was going to die if he kept the pressure up. The thin Nomu, having temporarily neutralized Midoriya, knocked him through another wall with a backhand that would have caved in a car door and turned on Shoto. It had figured out who was providing support, appeared beside him, and drove a fist into his ribs. He felt bones break, a jagged edge punching into his lung before he hit the ground, coughing up bright red. The thin Nomu lost interest immediately. In its cold, programmed logic, Shoto was no longer a threat. It turned its head toward the debris where Midoriya was currently clawing his way back to his feet. Around them, the facility was coming apart, support columns shattered, sections of the ceiling collapsing, fire spreading through the structure as it burned from the inside. Through a massive breach in the far wall, whether from Bakugo's explosions or the larger Nomu's fists, impossible to tell, early morning light filtered in. Beyond it, about 40 meters away, stood another building. A sign on the front, still legible through the dust and smoke. Sunshine Home for Children, Special Needs Care Facility. This was the same orphanage Midoriya mentioned earlier. Through the broken walls, he saw staff in colored scrubs rushing to evacuate, pushing wheelchairs and 4 stands beside beds, while the children, unable to walk or move on their own, lagged behind, needing to be carried. Evacuation would take time, minutes they didn't have. If the Nomu got past the 3 of them and reached that building, no! Midoriya screamed and pushed full cowling to 45%. His left leg gave out, splintering instead of breaking cleanly and buckling at an angle it shouldn't, but he kept fighting. He hurled himself at the thin Nomu using his right leg and his one remaining arm, dragging the ruined limb behind him like a broken wing. If he let go now, there would be nothing left between that monster and those children. Bakugo caught sight of the orphanage. His eyes widened for a fraction of a second before narrowing into lethal slits. His expression hardened past rage into a terrifying, crystalline resolve. An absolute refusal to yield a single inch of ground. You're not taking another step past me. He put himself squarely between the fat Nomu and the blown-out wall, the explosions he was putting out generating shockwaves that knocked down walls on their own. Not one step. Do you hear me? You want through. Then you're going to have to kill me first. You disgusting piece of shit. Bakugo's hands were ruined, the skin stripped from his palms and fingers, blood-slick flesh as every explosion sprayed a fine mist, each blast tearing him apart even as he fired them faster. Todoroki dragged himself upright, blood in his mouth and lungs, ribs grinding with every breath. He couldn't hold both fronts or even stand properly, but he could still do one thing. So he built walls. Ice rose between the Nomu and the orphanage. Massive, layered, reinforced with fire to harden them. But the thin Nomu shattered the first layer without breaking its stride. The larger one punched through the next while advancing on Bakugo. Shoto didn't stop as he forced a third wall, then a fourth, each thinner than the last, each costing him a piece of his consciousness. He wasn't fighting them anymore, just trying to keep something, anything, between them and those kids. Both sides of his quirk were guttering out. The ice was forming in brittle, incomplete sheets, and fire was sputtering, flaring, and dying like a lighter running out of fluid. He thought of his mother and the simple truth. He was going to die here because he hadn't been strong enough. The thin Nomu pinned Midoriya against a collapsed pillar while the larger one drove Bakugo back toward the far wall. Todoroki tried to throw one more ice wall in front of the larger one, and his right side barely responded. A thin, cracked sheet that the Nomu walked through like it was tissue paper. It turned from Bakugo not because he had stopped, he was still blasting and screaming, but because he no longer mattered. It reached through a cloud of desperate, bloody explosions, seized Todoroki by the throat, and hoisted him off the ground. Through the orphanage windows, close enough to see through dust and smoke, Midoriya spotted a little girl in a wheelchair, watching in terror, unable to move, with no one reaching her. He pushed full cowling to 60%. His right arm shattered completely, bone tearing through flesh as it collapsed into something useless, but the surge was enough. He broke free for a split second, closed the distance, and, unable to use the ruined arm, drove a kick with his one remaining leg, putting everything he had into it. The blow broke larger Nomu's grip, and Todoroki hit the ground, gasping for air. "Get them out!" Midoriya screamed at the orphanage staff visible through the wreckage. "Please, take the children and run. We'll hold them here, so please just..." Evacuation crawled at an agonizing pace, with children who could barely move and staff carrying them and forcing wheelchairs through rubble. And even with all that effort, they still needed 5 more minutes. The 3 of them didn't have it. The thin Nomu was already behind Midoriya the moment he stopped, a hand closing around his throat and lifting him off the ground. The larger one turned back toward Bakugo, who charged again with a broken scream and ruined hands. Todoroki lay paralyzed, unable to summon even a spark of frost. It was over. Midoriya hung there with a broken arm at his side and a shattered leg dragging uselessly, his vision closing in at the edges, leaving him with no strength to fight back. Wait, one for all didn't flow through his limbs. It flowed through him, all of him, every cell. If he pulled on the source itself, not channeling it through an arm or a leg but releasing it from his core, from everywhere at once, it would kill him. The output would tear him apart from the inside, leaving nothing behind. But it might be enough to destroy the thin Nomu, stagger the larger one, give Kaken an opening, and buy time for the evacuation. That was reason enough. "Mom, I am sorry. You told me to be careful. You asked me to come home and I promised I would. I am so sorry. All Might, you gave me everything I have. I was supposed to be the vessel. I was supposed to carry the fire forward until I was worthy of the name. I wanted to see that future. I really did. But this is the only way I can protect it. Please, forgive me." He pulled on one for all, not from a limb but from the source. 70, 80, 90, 100. His body began to come apart, blood vessels rupturing across his chest and arms as something deep inside failed. A spreading wrongness he couldn't even name. Still, he pushed further, because he knew it wasn't enough. 1,001 millio, the temperature spiked. So sudden and violent that even as his body shut down, organs failing, vision darkening, and throat crushed, Midoriya still felt it. Heat.
UA faculty dorms.
The faculty dorms sat at the far northeastern edge of UA, a quiet cluster of reinforced units beyond the main buildings, separated from the dorms by a broad stone courtyard lined with Zelkova trees. A gravel path linked them to the campus road, while the support staff worked late in a low annex to the south. Beyond the northern tree line, a 40-foot perimeter wall stood lined with motion sensors, sealing this corner as the calmest stretch of the grounds. DABI's flat occupied the eastern corner of the second floor, its narrow balcony overlooking the courtyard. Inside, the layout was simple: a living room, a compact kitchen, and a short hall leading to 2 bedrooms. The walls had been repaired twice. Once after an incident involving a nightmare and a bed frame, and the next time because Eri had wanted a bigger window. Both times, Cementos had handled it without complaint. Tonight, moonlight spilled through the widened window, painting a pale rectangle across Eri's empty bed. She slept instead in the master bedroom, curled against Rumi, fingers knotted in fabric, her small horn catching faint light as her breathing remained slow and even. Rumi lay still, one arm draped protectively over her. DABI was away completing a small assignment his daughter had given him. So today the apartment held only them. Then the air in the living room split open. Kurogiri's warp gate tore through the silence, a vertical seam of dark mist spilling outward, pooling low across the floor. Chimera entered first, ducking beneath the frame, his bulk compressing the space as his gaze swept the room and caught two heat signatures, prompting him to lift a hand. Slice emerged behind him, already in motion, pressing to the wall and advancing toward the bedroom without a sound. His focus sharpened to a single objective. Mummy followed, bandages trailing like probing tendrils, mapping the space as he moved toward the kitchen. Then Himiko Toga stepped through the mist with her hands clasped behind her back, tilting her head at the apartment like a bird studying something small and alive. Ah! Toga pressed her hands to her cheeks. Her voice came out in that breathy, sing-song register she slipped into when something caught her attention. Look at this place, these little shoes, and the drawings. Are those hers? They're so cute. Oh my God. She drifted toward the fridge, fingers hovering over a crayon drawing of what might have been a rabbit and a person with blue lines on their face. She really is just a normal little kid, isn't she? She was living her own small life, drawing her pictures, and falling asleep with her favorite plush as if nothing else in the world mattered. Her golden eyes held something unfamiliar. Not cruelty, but a thin, unsettling wonder, like a cat transfixed by a fishbowl. Toga and everyone, stay focused. Nine's voice. She didn't turn around. I am focused. I am just saying it's adorable. Don't you think it's cute? Nine? The little family setup? Papa's out working. Mama Rabbit's in bed with the baby. It's like something straight out of a picture book.
Toga.
Okay. She rocked back on her heels, still smiling. I am ready. I have been ready. You don't have to be so serious all the time, you know? Nine ducked through the gate, tall, pale, white hair falling past his shoulders, the bulk of his life support corset encasing him from waist to nose. The dark mask hummed softly, regulators cycling as tubes traced his ribs, while amber indicators pulsed at his collarbone like a slow mechanical heartbeat. His pale, rectangular eyes, white-pupiled and devoid of expression, swept the room with the detached precision of a man inventorying cargo. His gaze settled on each member of his team in turn. The target is the child's quirk. Rewind, he said, his voice steady under the soft cycling of the regulators. That's the only thing in this apartment that concerns us, so keep your focus and don't get distracted by anything else. He looked at Toga. You will handle the extraction as planned, and if she panics and you can't calm her down, restrain her carefully, he said, his tone firm and deliberate. We need the quirk intact, which means the child stays unharmed, so don't make any mistakes. Understood? Toga gave him a thumbs up and a smile that belonged on a school field trip. Got it. Calm, gentle, in and out. I can be excellent with kids when I want to be. You've never held a normal conversation with one, Slice said from the hallway, tone flat, not even glancing back. Wow, rude. I could be great with kids. You don't know. Nine ignored both of them. The rabbit hero is in the bedroom with her. He let that sit for a second. Don't underestimate her. And let's keep this quiet. Chimera rolled his neck, a sharp crack echoing from his spine. And if it gets loud? We're inside UA's campus, Nine said, glancing toward the moonlit courtyard beyond the balcony. If this turns loud, we are working against a 4-minute window before reinforcements arrive, so the objective doesn't change. You keep it contained. Chimera huffed. 4 minutes is plenty. Nine didn't respond. He simply turned toward the bedroom door as the regulators hissed and the amber lights pulsed in steady intervals. Go! Meanwhile, on the other side of the country, DABI stepped off the plane in Osaka looking like he had lost a fight with his own stomach. 2 planes in one day had taken more out of him than he would admit. Still, he muttered, glancing at the photo in his hand. Hawks striking a perfect, effortless pose while DABI looked as uninterested as ever. Mission accomplished. Below the picture, Hawks had written a message to Ari, signed it too. Drew a little feather next to her name. If it had just been the photo and autograph, DABI would have flown back hours ago. But there was something else he had come here for. Hawks' agency was busy. Sidekicks moving through hallways, screens running live patrol feeds, and the general organized chaos of a top 3 heroes operation. In the training area off the main floor, Fumikage Tokoyami was running drills with 2 of Hawks' sidekicks. They were walking him through response protocols, positioning, communication timing, and how to coordinate Dark Shadow's range with a team that was moving fast. The kid was focused, absorbing everything. So, DABI leaned against the railing. How's Tokoyami doing? Oh, the kid is great. Hawks tilted his head, watching a drill play out below. Good instincts, doesn't freeze up. Give me a year with him and he would be top 10 material. DABI watched Tokoyami for another second, then turned to Hawks. You could have just called me, you know? If you wanted details about the USJ attack, you should have come to me. He said it the same way he said everything. I am the one actually involved. But you have to drag my student into this. Don't you? Hawks laughed. Easy, bright, completely unconvincing. Ahaha. Man, what are you even talking about? Tokoyami's here for his internship. That's it. You're reading way too much into this, DABI. Seriously, do you write conspiracy theories in your spare time? Something like novels? Pick up a hobby or some. Yeah, it must be. DABI said nothing, his gaze drifting over the training floor. Hawks kept smiling, but that smile remained superficial, never reaching anything that mattered. But hey, since we're in the novel already, DABI said, still watching Tokoyami run drills below. Usually the next chapter is the part where somebody goes and tightens up a few screws that got rusty, right? There was nothing subtle about it. The Hero Public Safety Commission, the leash that had shaped Hawks into a weapon before he could understand it and still held him bound. I know your bosses don't trust me, DABI said. That's fine. It goes both ways. They still considered the possibility, however slim, that he was connected to All for One. DABI. No, listen. I am not here to argue about it. He finally turned to look at Hawks directly. It's not going to get fixed with meetings and definitely not with reports, background checks, or whatever surveillance they have got running on me this month. That's just how it is. So leave it. Hawk's smile had gotten thinner. Just don't push me on this. DABI held his gaze. Because if you force my hand, I'll deal with it myself, and if it comes to that, the outcome will favor me, not them. Hawks looked at him for a long time. The grin was gone now. Without it, his face looked younger and a lot less fun. You know, Hawks said, quiet, almost to himself, for a guy who says he has got nothing to do with Hero Society, you sure do talk like someone who is still in the game. Bad habit. Neither of them said anything else about it. DABI was settling back after the nightmare of a return flight, and when his phone finally picked up a signal, notifications flooded in. Most of the emails were junk, news alerts, or other irrelevant content. He received a message from Rumi, which was just a photo of Ari asleep on the couch with the TV still on. He scrolled past them, then he stopped at a message from the green-haired kid. He opened it and his face changed. The laziness dropped out of his posture. Then he ran toward the exit at a speed that made people in the terminal hallway flatten themselves against the walls. He hit the doors, burst through them into open air, and looked in the direction he needed to go. Then he jumped straight up with no runway, just bent his knees and launched himself into the sky with a force that cracked the pavement where he had been standing. He went up and up and up, past the height of the terminal building, past the height of anything near the airport, to a point where the people on the ground below would have looked like specks if he had bothered to look down. He was still in his civilian clothes. At the apex of the jump, he threw both hands behind him, and fire erupted from his palms. From the soles of his feet too, blue-white jets screamed against the air, shoving him forward with a force that multiplied every second. The acceleration was brutal. Within moments he was moving fast enough that the air compressed in front of him and a white cone of vapor trailed behind his body like a jet contrail. Was he flying? Almost, but not quite yet. He didn't have sustained lift, couldn't hover, or change direction with any kind of control. What he could do was launch himself in a straight line and use his fire as thrust to maintain speed and altitude. It was less flying and more being a human rocket pointed at a destination and hoping the math worked out. And he was still getting used to this mode of transport. The arachnid genome had changed things in his body that he was only beginning to catalog. The obvious stuff was wall crawling, increased strength, and reflexes that had jumped by an order of magnitude. But his fire control had gotten sharper too, more precise and responsive, like the genome had improved the neural pathways that connected his quirk to his intent. He still hadn't developed the organic web part, which he believed was still possible since 70% of the genome was still locked. That would come later, or it wouldn't. Right now, the only thing that mattered was speed. How fast he could cover the distance between where he was and where his students were. He pushed more fire out. The white trail behind him widened. Rumi woke up just as the intruders entered the main hall. It was an instantaneous, predatory intuition, triangulating a heartbeat that wasn't present before. Something was wrong. Her arm pulled tight around Ari. 3 seconds, that was all she had. She swept the girl into her chest and blew off the bed in one motion, her legs firing with everything she had, and detonated off the mattress. The bedroom door exploded inward off its hinges a half-breath after a millisecond. Under Rumi's watchful eyes entered an animalistic-looking man. He has blue fur, a wolf-like head, hands, and feet resembling an eagle's talons, and a long reptilian tail. A mutant type? Rumi thought, trying to figure out the humanoid figure. Chimera's massive frame filled the doorway. His clawed hand raked through the empty space where they had been sleeping, the mattress tearing open in 3 deep, parallel furrows that sent white fur filling the room. If he actually has the physical output of all 3 of the animal features, then I can't let him grab me. Rumi hit the far wall with both feet, kicked off and rocketed across the room. Her right heel connected with Chimera's jaw, a clean, concentrated strike carrying the full rotational force of her body behind it. TSK, that answers my question. Rumi knew that any normal man's skull would have come apart. Nevertheless, the impact snapped Chimera's head sideways, driving him into the doorframe hard enough to crack it. He steadied with a stagger, rolling his jaw as something in his neck popped. TCH. He spat blood onto the floor. Going straight for the kill? Is this how you greet a fellow mutant type? Rumi couldn't care less about his blabbering as she kicked again with the same leg, this time her heel driving straight into his throat. Rumi didn't look back, her crimson eyes fixed on the hallway, tracking the shapes shifting through the dust. Stay behind me and tuck your head. Whatever happens, you don't move until I call your name. IMSC. I know, baby. Her voice was hard and gentle at the same time. But you trust Mama, right? She straightened as the hallway stretched ahead. Bedroom at her back, bathroom to the right, the living room open in front. At least, through the drifting plaster dust, she spotted all the intruders. Chimera still bent double in the bedroom doorway, one hand clamped over his crushed throat, each breath coming out wet and struggling wheeze, and whatever cocky grin he had been kicked clean off his face. At the far end of the corridor, Slice stood lethally, hair fanning outward in a slow spread that turned the corridor into a narrowing kill zone of organic blades. To the left, at the kitchen's entrance, stood Mummy, his bandages unspooling across the floor like serpents. and in the center of the living room was 9. Finally, behind Chimera's hunched frame, came another figure leaning out just far enough to see her fingers waggle. "Hi." Toga's voice was warm as a greeting card. "Wow, you are so fast. That was like whoosh, bam, whoosh. Super cool." Rumi bared her teeth, a predator's warning, like a rabbit poised to kill with its hind legs. 9's plan for a quiet extraction had died in the first 3 seconds. But this was different. This wasn't any of that. Every movement she made started and ended at the same point, airy against the wall behind her. She held her ground, neither advancing nor pressing an attack, making no move to take space or finish anyone off. She fought like a mother. That was the difference, and none of them had accounted for it. Unlike their plan, she didn't advance at them grudgingly. And quite contrary, she held an invisible boundary between the world and her daughter. It was as if it were telling me anything that crossed that line was going to learn exactly why a rabbit is most dangerous when it's cornered over its young. "My apologies. I couldn't finish her." Chimera's voice is a wet, guttural rattle. His movements are more cautious while blood trails down his chin, teeth rattling loose in his gums from that first devastating kick. "Still standing, huh?" She didn't give him a chance to find his footing. "Luna fall." She launched herself at him again, slipping under the clawed swipe before planting her hands and driving both heels into his sternum. The blow connected, making him cough more blood. But this time he gritted his teeth and charged again, only to be met with a spinning heel that cracked his ribs, followed by a precise kick to his already ruined throat that reduced his roar to a pathetic, gurgling wheeze. He was tough, monstrously so, but Rumi is managing to dismantle him quite effortlessly, and they both knew it. DABI isn't the only one that has been training over the last years and is growing strong. Rumi had been right there beside him. Unlike DABI, who was assisted by his system, her evolution was fueled by a singular, burning competitive streak. She was far too proud and persistent to let her partner leave her in the dust or, worse, to ever find herself holding him back in a fight. And as far as DABI could tell, Rumi had definitely surpassed her original strength from the show. "Mummy, now!" Chimera choked out. From the kitchen entrance, a dozen white, high-tension bandages erupted, bypassed Rumi, and streaked toward the hallway, more specifically towards Eri. However, Rumi spun off Chimera, intercepted the first wave mid-flight, caught 2 tendrils with her ankle and shredded them. She landed, pivoted, tore through 3 more, closed the gap to the kitchen entrance in 2 strides, and drove her fist into Mummy's face. His head snapped back as the bandages fell slack, and he crashed into the kitchen counter hard enough to shatter it. She was back in position before Chimera could take a single step toward Eri. The entire exchange lasted 2 seconds. She had crossed the kill zone, neutralized the threat, and returned to her post without leaving Eri exposed for more than a heartbeat. Chimera stood trembling, blood dripping from his maw. Mummy lay slumped amidst broken granite. In under a minute, the number 5 hero had systematically crippled 2 of the 3 most dangerous 2 of the 3 frontline fighters. 9 watched from the living room, his cold, rectangular gray eyes sharpening at last. The mission had been simple: abduct the girl. Eri's quirk was the real objective, and his arrangement with All for One had been straightforward. 9 would claim the quirk, they would take the girl, and both sides would walk away. He needed the rewind quirk for himself. His body could only handle a limited number of quirks, and he was already nearing that limit with 5 active. A replica of All for One, air wall, scanning, finger lasers, and his own weather manipulation. A few slots remained, but each one mattered, and a wrong choice meant being permanently stuck with something useless. Rewind removed that risk. It would let him reset his own state, erase mistakes, and recover from damage in the middle of a fight, turning every future choice into a safe one. This was the perfect quirk for him at this point. She is significantly stronger than the briefing indicated. His voice came from the living room, flat, clinical. He raised a hand, and a compressed wall of air slammed into Rumi from behind, driving her into the hallway wall with crushing force. "Damn it!" Rumi hissed internally. "He is not even looking at me." She caught herself, twisted, and kicked off into a steady landing. But the brief recovery gave Chimera enough time to close in. Air wall. One of 9 stolen quirks, fully effective indoors without relying on weather. But that half-second of recovery was all the opening Chimera needed. "Stay down!" The beastman lunged, a clawed swipe aimed at her head. Rumi slipped under the arc of his arm and, again, drove her heel into his already damaged ribs, the impact ripping a howl from him. "This bitch!" Chimera's thoughts dissolved into white static as the impact detonated through his side. She is hitting the same spot on purpose. Then an air wall struck from the left, catching her shoulder and spinning her sideways. How is he able to shift his origin points? She noted, rolling through it and coming back up. "Chimera, stop being a brute and move," Slice shouted from the end of the hall. Her hair began to fan out, the needles glinting like surgical steel. "You're in my way." Rumi rolled through the pressure, popping up just as Slice's hair tore across the corridor in a horizontal sweep. She snapped back, but a single wire-thin strand traced her forearm. "Huff, it's shallow." She glanced down at the thin cut spreading across her skin. "You're so pretty when you bleed, Rabbit-san." Toga's voice giggled from the shadows of the bedroom. "Can I have just a little more? Just a teeny-weeny drop?" 9 watched the hallway from the living room, eyes tracking Rumi's movement patterns. He knew his weather manipulation would bring the entire complex down on the target, so he limited his approach to only smaller quirks. She neutralized Chimera effectively, and Mummy is non-functional, he assessed. Slice's hair controls the corridor geometry, but won't hold if Usajiyama commits to closing the distance. 9 doesn't think he is fighting a losing battle. He knew under his constant interference his air walls were definitely cutting her timing from unseen angles and constantly keeping her on edge. And not to mention, she can't leave the child's perimeter. That was a leverage they could hold on to. Chimera, driven by a cocktail of adrenaline and pure, animalistic shame, charged again. Or tried to, as Rumi met the charge head-on. She delivered a straight, brutal thrust to his solar plexus. The blow lifted the 300-pound man clean off his feet, driving him backward through the bathroom door. "I can't," Chimera thought, staring at the cracked ceiling through one eye, the other already swelling shut. "I can't get up." Chimera is compromised. 9 noted, his tone unchanged. "Mummy, finish the containment." An air wall swept across the back of Rumi's knees, forcing a brief buckle. She turned the stumble into a tactical roll, rising just as Mummy re-engaged. He dragged himself off the ruined kitchen counter, his lower jaw hanging down, clearly broken. He didn't speak, or he couldn't, but his bandages lashed out with a frantic, vengeful speed. They coiled like vipers, snapping around Rumi's ankle, her left wrist, and her forearm. "Got you," Mummy thought, his eyes burning with a dull yellow light. "Oh, that's not good for her," Toga observed, tilting her head. Rumi barked as she felt her muscles bulging and straining against the high-tension fabric. "I need to be fast." She worked through them in quick succession, ripping each one before it could fully lock, but every break cost her a fraction of a second. Those fractions were starting to add up. Slice's hair moved to cut her while practically captured, and while dodging the most, a few managed to get through. Her cheek, shoulder, and the bridge of her nose had traces of cuts, leaving blood running down her face and arms onto the hallway floor. However, she didn't even blink. Just then, Chimera, who was down, dragged himself out of the bathroom. Obviously, he was nowhere near normal and practically a half-dead man if it weren't for her beastly nature. "I didn't know you were a cockroach too." Rumi immediately jumped, with a sharp kick to his jaw, the same one she had already damaged beyond recognition. He was slammed sideways into the wall, slid down it in a smear of blood, then forced himself back up, slower than before. "Stay down," Rumi said, the words carrying the final edge of a predator's warning before restraint gave way. "Make me." Chimera slurred through a mouthful of broken enamel. "Sure," Rumi obliged. She pivoted in a blur, a spinning heel snapping his head into the drywall with a crack that shook the apartment. The follow-up drive buried itself into his already shattered ribs, flattening him for good. "That's all I have got left," Chimera thought, cheek pressed against the floor. Mummy came in the moment Chimera dropped, bandages firing from every angle at once, layering over each other. Rumi tore through the first wave, caught the second around her forearm, used the grip to yank him forward instead of fighting the pull, and drove her knee into his already shattered jaw. 2 down, Rumi sighed, though blood continued to run freely from the cuts across her body, streaking the floor beneath her. 9 watched without reaction. Enough! He stepped out of the living room into the hallway, the regulators in his mask cycling faster, their rising whine bleeding into the air as pressure shifted through the apartment. Both of 9's hands rose, twin beams of violet light, finger lasers, lanced out, tight and concentrated. Rumi twisted clear as one punched through the wall behind her, missing Eri by feet, while the other grazed her hip, searing through fabric and flesh, and she kept moving, closing the distance. The decision carried risk, leaving space behind her, but letting him continue meant death by attrition. Her kick slammed into his crossed forearms, forcing him back as his boots carved into the floor, the reinforced plating of his life support corset absorbing part of the blow. His hand dropped, and an air wall struck her point blank in the stomach, knocking the breath from her. Before she could reset, a follow-up laser cut toward her lead leg. She twisted just a moment too late. The beam carved into her calf, the muscle buckling under the heat. She caught herself on one hand, spinning through the white-hot agony, and drove her other leg upward under 9's chin. Crack. His head snapped back as the mask shrieked and his body slammed into the wall, an amber indicator along his collar flickering out. 9 steadied, fingers brushing his mask as his breathing turned uneven, and when his gaze returned to her, certainty had already given way to cold recalculation. "Slice," he said. "Cover me." The response was instantaneous. Slice's hair fanned out, flooding the hallway. Thousands of silver-white strands wove into a high-tension lattice, sealing the corridor wall-to-wall and floor-to-ceiling in a web of razor-sharp filaments. "Damn it, long-range fighters." Rumi cursed as she pulled back toward Eri, already bleeding from multiple places from her previous cuts. 9 withdrew to the living room, one indicator on his collar still dark, his breathing strained. Yet both hands rose again as a purple glow gathered in his palms behind the shifting curtain of hair. He seemed more aggressive in his strategy, now that she had shown him what closing the distance cost him. On the other hand, Rumi ran the options in the space of a single breath. Closing the distance might leave Eri exposed. But at the same time, holding position meant getting worn down by lasers and those annoying air walls, and taking out Slice required throwing herself in the razor storm. So she did the only thing left. Held her ground, standing in front of her daughter and taking the hits. Taking the opportunity, a finger laser seared across her shoulder. An air wall crashed into her already bruised ribs. The razor hair traced lines across her ears, collarbone, and hands. For 4 minutes, she calculated through the haze of pain. The seismic sensors on this side of the UA campus would have tripped by now. I just have to last 4 minutes. Behind her, Eri had her eyes squeezed shut, her small hands balled into white-knuckled fists. She refused to look, but the sounds painted a horrific picture. The wet thwip of hair cutting skin, the sizzle of lasers hitting flesh, and the heavy, bone-deep thuds of her mama's body being driven into the walls. Every impact vibrated through the floorboards and into Aries' bones. This horror is my fault. The thought surfaced from the deep place, the overhaul place, the room with no windows where she had learned what she was and what her quirk did to people. They are here because of me. This situation is all my fault. That was what he had told her, what she was meant to be. A curse in the shape of a little girl, the reason everything went wrong for the people who loved her, and Papa got hurt because of her. And now Mama is hurt, all because I am cursed. A bullet laser punched through the wall above her head. Ache! The impact made her flinch hard, curling tighter, pressing her face into her knees until she could feel her own heartbeat against them. The sounds of fights and crashes kept increasing and increasing. Maybe if I weren't here. Then it faded, not silence, but an abrupt stillness.
Eri.
The voice reached her warm, familiar, and dripping with a maternal softness that made Aries' heart ache. It was the voice of safety. Eri, it's over now. You can open your eyes. Eri opened her eyes. The world was a blur of dust and shadowed red. But there, crouched directly in front of her, was the woman she accepted as her mother. The woman had the same fierce crimson eyes, the same shock of snow-white hair, and a face marked by the soot and blood of the struggle. Yet, as she looked at Eri, her features melted into that specific, softening smile, the one that promised the monsters were gone and the burrow was safe again. Come here, baby. It's all right now. Eri didn't hesitate. She lunged forward, throwing her small arms around her mother's neck and burying her face into the crook of her shoulder. She was still trembling, but Mama was here, and it was over, and something feels wrong. Eri wondered as she broke the hug.
Eri.
Get away from her. That's not me. The real Rumi's voice tore through the hallway from 10 feet away, raw with a terror that Eri had never heard before. Meanwhile, the hand that already held Eri locked in place as the arms around her tightened. Rumi stood 10 feet away behind a wall of Slice's hair that choked the corridor, blood running from a dozen cuts and burns along her calf and shoulder, balanced on one good leg as she screamed. Himiko Toga's quirk, transform, worked through ingested blood, even a trace enough to trigger it, but duration scaled with volume. A few drops gathered from the floor in the chaos, pressed to her lips while Slice's hair obscured Rumi's view, would only by a brief window, 90 seconds at best, likely less, and that was all she needed. The setup had been in motion from the moment the fight began. Slice's hair functioned as more than a weapon or barrier, its shifting lattice carving deliberate blind spots. A brief, controlled pocket where Rumi couldn't see through. Her focus stayed fixed on shielding Eri, tracking every threat aimed at the girl. Bandages, claws, strands of hair, while Toga moved elsewhere. During Chimera's final charge, which sent him through the bathroom door, Toga managed to collect a single fresh drop of blood that had spilled across the room and brought it to her lips. The transformation followed within seconds, hidden behind the shifting screen as her body reshaped. Frame lengthening, skin darkening, white hair spilling free, and muscle forming where there had been none. Then the lattice shifted again, opening space on Eri's far side, beyond Rumi's view as she faced the incoming threats. Toga stepped around the corner wearing Rumi. Same face, eyes, and voice, as she crouched in front of the terrified girl in the dark. Trying to slip past Rumi to reach Eri would have failed. Rumi would have sensed it immediately and caught her. But Toga didn't need to get past Rumi. Instead, she needed Eri to come to her, and a 4-year-old girl, scared out of her mind in the dark, hearing her mama's voice say it was over, of course she ran. Let go of her. Rumi threw herself at the hair screen. Toga's transformation began to come apart as her body shrank, skin paled, blonde hair spilled down past her shoulders, and the face looking down at Eri became a stranger's. Golden eyes and a small, apologetic smile. Sorry about the trick, little one, Toga whispered. Her voice was her own now, light and girlish. But hey, you were really brave back there, and I mean it. Eri screamed, looking up and saw the wrong face. Toga crouched down next to Eri, one hand still on the girl's shoulder. She tilted her head and looked at the child with genuine, unnerving warmth. The fascination of someone who thought fear was cute the same way kittens were cute. Hey, sweetie. Toga's voice was sing-song and gentle. You're really adorable up close, you know that? Look at those little red eyes. Ah, they're kind of like your mama's. Well, almost. She scrunched her nose. Anyway, I am not going to hurt you, okay? So just sit still for me. Be a good girl. The smile widened a fraction. And nobody has to get cut. Rumi took a step forward. Her voice was vibrating. Get your hands off my daughter. Or what? Toga looked up at her. The smile didn't waver, but she wasn't exactly mocking. She sounded like she was actually asking. I mean, yeah, you're crazy fast. I saw the whole fight. It was amazing, seriously. But her golden eyes flicked to the wall of Slice's hair still hanging between them, a lattice of razor strands that caught the light. That's a lot of edges between here and there, Mama. Rumi's body was coiled to launch. Every nerve, every muscle, every predatory instinct her quirk had built into her was screaming the same thing. Kill them, kill all of them, yet to her now. But Slice's hair filled the corridor, and that knife was on Toga's knee, inches from Eri, and if she moved wrong, I wouldn't. Nine said from behind her, Your daughter's quirk. His flat eyes studied Rumi with a detached interest. Rewind, the ability to reverse a living being's biological state to any prior point. Cellular regression that shouldn't be possible within any known quirk framework. The regulators in his mask hissed. Do you have any idea how many people would kill for that ability? He raised one hand. Somewhere above the building, the sky groaned. I would kill for less. His voice didn't change. But I don't need to, all I want is to take it. He stepped toward her. Meanwhile, Eri opened her eyes for the first time. Now she saw. Rumi, her mama, stood between her and the man with the mask, battered, bleeding from a dozen cuts, one eye swelling shut, her fist covered in blood and the burned furrow on her calf where the laser had hit. The deeper cuts on her forearms were from shredding through Slice's hair with her bare hands. Red blood everywhere. On the walls, floor, running down her mama's face and dripping off her chin. All of it was for her, every wound and drop because they came for her. Mama is getting hurt because of me. Behind her, Toga tugged gently on her shoulder. Come on, sweetie. Change of plans. We're gonna go on a little picnic instead. Just you and me. It will be super foo. She stopped because Eri's horn was growing. It had been a nub of a thumbnail size, but now it was lengthening, thickening, curving upward, and glowing. A soft golden light at first, barely visible in the dark hallway. Toga took a step back. The smile was still on her face, but her eyes had gone sharp. Whoa, hey! She held up both hands. Hey, easy, you gotta calm down. Okay? Take a deep breath for me. Can you do that? Just. Eri looked up at her with red eyes flooded with gold. Tears ran down her cheeks. And the expression on her face wasn't fear anymore. Every other time this power had surged inside her. Every time the golden light had risen and the horn had grown and the world started to undo itself around her, Eri had fought it. She pulled back and resisted with everything she had. She concluded to fear it and that the golden light was a curse to be caged, contained, controlled, and never released. But tonight her home was rubble. Tonight strangers had broken through the walls and put knives next to her skin. Her mother, the woman who had taught her she was not a weapon, a curse, or something to be used, was bleeding and broken because Eri had been too scared to move. She was done being scared. For the first time in her life, Eri did not resist, but she let go. The shockwave was silent. No explosion, roar, or sound at all. Just a pulse. A sphere of golden light expanding outward from Eri's body in a perfect, soundless wave, washing over everything it touched. The radius wasn't large. It reached Toga, who was closest, maybe 4 feet away, and stopped just past her. Toga was hit first and hardest. She staggered, releasing Eri's shoulder. The knife clattered to the ground. Her hands went to her own body, her face, arms, and stomach, as something inside her began to move, to reverse. What's? Her voice hitched as her hands were shrinking. She held them up in front of her face and watched her fingers getting shorter, her palms getting smaller, the calluses from years of knife work smoothing over and disappearing. No, what is this? What's happening to... Her face was changing, the sharp angles of her jaw softening, cheekbones receding, frame contracting, clothes loosening, and pooling around a body that was getting smaller by the second. The years were coming off her like layers being stripped away. Stop! Stop! Can't... 9, help! Her voice climbed in pitch and her equipment clattered to the floor around her as the oversized clothes collapsed around a form that was diminishing, shrinking, rewinding. 18, her combat instincts are gone and her hands were too small to hold a knife. 15, the predatory sharpness draining from her eyes. 12, she tripped over her own clothes and fell. She was crying. For the golden light pulsed once more, blinding, and then began to fade. Where Himiko Toga had stood, a small blonde girl sat in a heap of clothing far too large for her. She was 4 years old. Her golden eyes were wide, glassy, and unfocused. She looked around the ruined apartment with the helpless confusion of any child who has woken up somewhere they don't recognize. She didn't know who she was or where she was. She was just a child. Everything happened so fast that nobody moved for a full second. 9 and Slice, all of them frozen, staring at the small blonde girl sitting in a pile of oversized clothes where a teenage villain had been standing a moment ago. Rumi broke first, turning to Eri. Her daughter lay on the ground, horn already shrinking, the golden light fading from her eyes, unconscious after exhausting everything she had. She took one step toward her, but just then the doors burst open. Aizawa came through first, capture scarf already deployed, goggles down, eyes blazing red. Behind him are present Mike, vocal cords already vibrating with a stored scream, and Vlad King, blood already drawn and hovering around his fists in hardened crimson gauntlets. Reinforcements arrived finally. Aizawa's eyes swept the room in a single pass. The destroyed walls, unconscious Eri, and a small blonde child in the pile of clothes. Rumi bleeding and barely standing. 9 near the balcony. Slice in the hallway. Chimera and Mummy down. His quirk activated, Erasure, snuffing out every ability in his line of sight as Slice's hair fell limp across the floor. The energy in 9's hands died, and the pressure in the room eased. He was a fraction too late for Eri, since Rewind had already been completed, but everything else was locked down. Mike and Kansas. Aizawa didn't raise his voice. Lock down the hallway. We've got 3 hostiles down. Mutant type, bandage type, and hair type. Move in and secure them, restraints on, fast. On it. Present Mick's voice thundered through the apartment, pure volume without his quirk, as he moved in on Chimera's unconscious body. Vlad King went for Mummy and Slice without a word, blood hardening into restraints as he moved. 9 assessed the situation in about 2 seconds. Kurogiri was supposed to get them out of here right now, but he isn't responding. His frontline fighters were down. Chimera unconscious with cracked ribs and a collapsed airway. Mummy out cold with a broken jaw, and Slice's quirk erased. Toga was a 4-year-old sitting on the floor. His life support system was compromised, one indicator dark and his breathing growing labored. He could still fight with abilities that functioned even under erasure, raw physical strength and the accumulated enhancements his body had absorbed over the years. But the rabbit hero was still standing. Eraserhead's eyes were on him. 2 more heroes were in the room. The math was done. He needed to leave immediately or else his people would have to. He couldn't finish the thought. Rumi reached Eri first, dropping to her knees as her hands moved over her daughter's body, checking for wounds, for blood, or for any sign of damage. She found none. Thank God. Thank God you are okay. Baby, Rumi said, her voice hoarse. I am sorry. Mama couldn't do better. I am so sorry. Not a single scratch. The rewind had been directed outward, not inward, leaving Eri unconscious but whole as a breath finally escaped Rumi, sharp and unsteady, before she looked at Aizawa. He was already there, crouching beside her, and then Rumi carefully transferred Eri into his arms, as if handing someone the most important thing in the world. Aizawa moved in without hesitation, conducting a methodical check. She lay limp but was breathing evenly, the horn already receding to its normal size. Carefully, he also lifted the small blonde girl. She weighed almost nothing in his arms, her body slack with unconsciousness, swallowed in clothes far too large for her. His eyes returned to Eri for a moment, scanning once more for any missed injury. Finding none, he let out a slow breath through his nose, some of the tension finally easing. He didn't want to imagine what DABI would do if anything had happened to her. The thought alone made him hold the girl a little more carefully. Rumi rose to her feet, and something in the room shifted, nothing visible or measurable, yet impossible to ignore. Aizawa sensed it, present mic stilled. Even Vlad King paused mid-restraint as it passed through him. Then Rumi turned toward 9. She wasn't shaking anymore. The frantic urgency of a mother protecting her child was gone, replaced by something quieter and far more dangerous. Her one good eye fixed on 9 with the flat, focused intensity of a predator that has confirmed its young are safe and is now free to do what predators do. 9 saw it too, raising both hands as a force of habit, an instinct to use quirks that Erasure had already shut down, and then realized they were dead. And it didn't work. No air wall, bullet laser, or weather manipulation. Rumi closed the distance in a single bound and drove a full-force kick into his face, with no restraint or regard for the building or his skull. 9 blasted through the wall, tearing past plaster and rebar into open air, slamming into the courtyard below, and bouncing twice before skidding to a stop near a Zelkova tree. The trunk split under the shockwave. Rumi followed without pause, dropping a story and striking hard enough to fracture the stone beneath her feet. She could have stayed inside. She knew his quirk, weather manipulation with lightning and wind, and that outdoors was his territory. Still, she stepped out and gave him the advantage without caring. She did not want a careful, tactical win or to wait for backup and play it smart. All she cared about was beating him into the ground herself. 9 pulled himself up, and as he moved out of Aizawa's line of sight, his quirks returned, static crackling across his shoulders. The sky above the courtyard darkened as clouds swirled in from nowhere, lightning flickering through the sudden overcast. You should have stayed inside, 9 said, blood running from his nose and a split across his forehead. His mask cracked and one regulator no longer cycling. Out here, I have... Rumi kicked again as 9 tried to block, an air wall forming between them that she drove through, her heel smashing into his raised forearms and sending him sliding backward across the courtyard, his boots carving grooves in the stone. He hurled lightning, a jagged bolt ripping from the swirling clouds above and striking toward her center mass. She twisted midair, felt the charge pass close enough to raise every hair on her body, and came down on him with a dropping axe kick that cratered the stone where he had been standing. He had dodged barely by rolling to the side, firing twin bullet lasers from his palms. One struck her across the forearm, but she neither flinched nor slowed, closing the distance in the next breath and driving a knee into his ribs, feeling something give on impact, and then his corset cracked and another indicator went dark. 9 unleashed a gale force blast that would have sent a normal person tumbling across the courtyard, but Rumi leaned into it, legs braced and pushed through, her feet tearing furrows in the stone without losing ground. Wah! 9 wheezed, blood in his mouth. She answered with a spinning kick to his jaw that sent him airborne, his body slamming into a Zelkova tree hard enough to split it in half. She was on him before he hit the ground, meeting him midair and driving both heels into his chest. When he crashed down, the impact cracked the ground in a spiderweb pattern that spread 15 feet in every direction. Inside the apartment, Present Mike and Vlad King finished restraining the last of Nine's team. Chimera lay unconscious, bound in hardened blood. Mummy was wrapped in his own bandages, his jaw wired shut with a strip of captured scarf, and Slice was face down on the floor, her wrists locked behind her back. Aizawa stood near the shattered wall, holding Eri against one shoulder and the small blonde girl against the other. Both were sleeping peacefully. He looked out through the hole in the wall at the courtyard below, and Rumi had Nine on the ground. She was hitting him methodically and systematically, with a focused fury that no longer ran on adrenaline but on something colder. Nine's lightning struck the courtyard twice more. Trees splintered, stone exploded, and scorch marks spread across the grounds like black veins. Rumi took a bolt across her back and kept hitting him. He threw an air wall into her stomach from point-blank range, and she doubled over for half a second and then straightened and kicked him so hard he left a trench in the courtyard stone. Present Mike came up beside Aizawa and looked out at the destruction. So, he watched Rumi drive Nine into the ground hard enough to send a shockwave rippling across the courtyard. Who's gonna stop her? Nobody answered as all three of them just watched in silence. It was clear they had no intention to interfere. Out in the courtyard, Rumi kicked Nine through a stone bench that ceased to exist, and when he tried to stand, she put him back down. He tried to call lightning, but she closed the distance before it formed and hit him hard enough to scatter the clouds he had been gathering. Cementos is going to have a rough week, Vlad King said, looking at the craters. The fight ended about 2 minutes later, not because Nine surrendered but because his body finally gave out. His life support system failed with every indicator going dark, the regulators falling silent, and his mask cracked open on one side, while his stolen quirks guttered out one by one as his body lost the capacity to sustain them. In the end, he was just a man on the ground, bleeding, broken, his white hair matted dark with blood. Rumi stood over him, breathing hard, one eye swollen shut, her left arm hanging wrong, burns across her back and forearm, and blood from a dozen cuts drying on her skin. She looked down at him and wanted to keep going, every part of her still demanding it. He had come into her home and put his people's hands on her daughter, standing in her living room and speaking of Eri's quirk as something to be harvested. But Eri was safe, asleep in Aizawa's arms without a scratch on her. Rumi turned away and walked back toward the building, slow and limping on her burned leg, her good arm hanging at her side, and she did not look back at Nine. Aizawa stood at the edge of the ruined balcony and looked out over the courtyard. Emergency lights strobed across the campus. More heroes would be arriving soon. Recovery teams, medical, and administration. Eri was still in his arms, and the small blonde girl was tucked into his capture scarf, bundled up like a sleeping bag, resting against his other shoulder. Toga, or at least what she had become, a 4-year-old, maybe younger, her golden eyes closed, small hands clutching the hem of the scarf like a blanket. Her face was round and soft and completely empty of everything that had made Himiko Toga dangerous. Aizawa studied her for a long, quiet moment. Then he adjusted the scarf around her shoulders, making sure she was warm and the fabric wasn't bunched under her chin. Present Mike walked over. He looked at the blonde girl, then at Eri and Aizawa. She okay? He meant Eri. Yeah, Aizawa said. And that one? Mike nodded at the blonde girl. Same, exhausted maybe. She will sleep for a while. Present Mike looked at Eri again and the dried tear tracks on her face. His expression shifted as several things moved behind his eyes. Pride, grief, and anger, all of them fighting for space. And then he turned away and walked toward the far end of the balcony to check the perimeter, because he kept looking at the 4-year-old girl who had just turned her own curse into a weapon to save her mother. He was going to start yelling at something, and the building really couldn't take any more of that tonight. Shota Aizawa watched her go, then looked back out at the courtyard, the destroyed trees and shattered stone, and the man lying motionless at the center of it all. Rumi, a mother, was making her way back up to the apartment. He could hear her footsteps on the stairs, uneven, heavy on one side, but steadily coming back home. Unknown location, high-tech laboratory, doctor. All for One's voice came through the communication device the way it always did. How are things progressing? Kurogiri has delivered 9 and his team to the target location. Dr. Garaki said. He stopped fidgeting with the pen and straightened. They should be making contact with the rabbit hero any moment now. But, Master, if I may be candid. You always may. I don't think this plan works. 9's group against the number 5 hero in close quarters, where she is at her most dangerous. Garaki's voice picked up speed the way it did when his analytical mind was running ahead of his mouth. Probability of a clean extraction is suboptimal. Mirko's combat record in confined spaces is frankly absurd, and she will be protecting the child, which means she won't be fighting to win but to kill. That's a different situation entirely, Master. All for One sounded like he was smiling. Perhaps. But I didn't send 9 because I expected a guaranteed outcome. If his team succeeds, wonderful. If they don't, a pause. Well, then we will have learned something useful about what it takes. Garaki went quiet for a moment. The simultaneous operations are nearly ready to launch as well, he said, moving on. Multiple low-grade Nomu deployments across the metropolitan sectors, coordinated timing. But I confess, I don't entirely follow the broader logic, Master. These Nomu, the top 10 will neutralize them within the hour. Endeavor and Best Jeanist are already moving. So what exactly are we reminding them? I am sorry? The hero community already suspects I have returned. All for One's tone didn't change. But the public doesn't know? The static hummed. Tonight, All for One continued. They feel it. Chaos is no longer something that happens to others. Once that understanding settles into the public, once they feel in their bones that the era of peace is ending, it doesn't leave. It grows and erodes trust in the system from the inside, which is so much more effective than attacking the system from the outside. He paused again. Wouldn't you agree, Doctor? You've always had a talent for the long game, Master. Garaki's voice had that particular quality it got when he was genuinely impressed and slightly unnerved at the same time. With the cities in flames, the local heroes will be pinned down. Response times to UA will be delayed by the sheer volume of civilian distress calls. The system will be too busy putting out fires to notice the one we've started in their own backyard. Garaki paused, his eyes flickering to a secondary screen. One more thing. Our intelligence confirms that the hero DABI is currently in the Osaka region. Given the distress signal from his students, he will almost certainly attempt to reach the Nomu engagement site. Depending on his travel speed, he could arrive within. Good. Garaki blinked. Good. If he arrives, he arrives. 2 high-grade Nomu against a man who nearly died at the USJ. All for One's voice was pleasant. Today might be the day we remove that particular inconvenience from the board. He appeared out of nowhere, disrupted several carefully laid plans, and has been an irritation ever since. If Nomu finishes him, well, one less variable. And if they don't, then we will have learned something useful about him too. All for One said it the way someone might say, then we will try a different restaurant next time. Either way, the evening is productive. Understood, Master. Click. The line went dead. Garaki set the communicator down, He looked at his screens, the tracking data, Nomu vitals, and the satellite feeds showing multiple points of engagement lighting up across the country. Then his gaze shifted to the file on his secondary monitor. DABI? Unknown. The file was nearly empty, and that bothered him. All for one, his master regarded DABI as a minor nuisance, a pest that had wandered into the wrong room. But Garaki wasn't so sure. Something in the USJ data, the way DABI evolved his quirk output in mid-fight and the unnatural rate at which his combat instincts evolved kept needling the doctor's mind. It was a pattern he had seen before, decades ago, but the pieces didn't quite fit the current board. But the master had spoken, and the master was rarely wrong. Rarely. Back to Izuku's location. Mom, I am sorry. You told me to be careful. You asked me to come home, and I promised I would. I am so sorry. All Might, you gave me everything I have. I was supposed to be the vessel. I was supposed to carry the fire forward until I was worthy of the name. I wanted to see that future, I really did. But this is the only way I can protect it. Please, forgive me. He pulled on one for all. Not from a limb, but from the source. 70, 80, 90, 100. His body began to come apart, blood vessels rupturing across his chest and arms as something deep inside failed. A spreading wrongness he couldn't even name. Still, he pushed further, because he knew it wasn't enough. 1,001 millio, the temperature spiked, so sudden and violent that even as his body shut down, organs failing, vision darkening, and throat crushed, Midoriya still felt it. Heat? And blue flames? Immediately, the thin Nomu's hand began to loosen on Midoriya's throat. The gray, corded fingers snapped open involuntarily as the arm attached to its shoulder became a pillar of incandescent blue. It sheathed the creature's entire forearm in a flame so predatory and concentrated that the oxygen in a 5-foot radius vanished into a vacuum of white-hot vapor. The creature shrieked back in pain and lurched backward, its hyper-regeneration firing in a desperate, frantic cycle. Thud! Midoriya hit the ground. Through the gray static eating the edges of his sight, he saw something appear between him and the Nomu. DABI-sensei. His vision was fading, coming back, and fading again. He is here. DABI was breathing hard, the sharp, rhythmic pattern of total concentration pushed to its maximum, his lungs working at a capacity that would have ruptured a normal person's respiratory system. He had crossed hundreds of kilometers in minutes, launched himself through the sky using his own fire as thrust, and landed between his students and 2 bioengineered killing machines without slowing down. But it was his face that told you everything you needed to know about what was about to happen. In the final seconds of his descent, he saw everything. The underground facility in ruins, the orphanage exposed through shattered walls, and his students broken and bleeding across the ground. Shoto coughing up his life on the floor. Katsuki, hands ruined, still refusing to stop blasting. And Izuku was suspended in that gray grip, throat crushed, his body trembling with a suicidal surge of one for all, one heartbeat from erasing him completely. 1 second, DABI's eyes moved across the wreckage and the bloodied floor. It settled on the 3 teenagers who had been fed into a meat grinder and had the audacity to keep fighting anyway. His hands were shaking, and surely it wasn't out of exhaustion. "How dare you?" he said. His voice was quiet, and that was the wrong part. DABI yelling was DABI being DABI, sharp, biting, and in command. DABI's quiet meant something else entirely. "How dare you lay a hand on my students?" The 2 Nomu oriented themselves toward him. The thin one was still burning, its arm regenerating in fits and starts, the blue fire clinging to the new tissue and burning it away again as fast as it formed. And the larger juggernaut, which had been grinding Bakugo into the floor, turned its vacant, bulbous eyes toward DABI. Whatever passed for intelligence inside their dark, modified skulls, the threat assessment in the room had just been changed. DABI didn't look at the Nomu. His gaze shifted over his shoulder instead. "Midoriya," His voice was a flat, terrifyingly level line, and the rage beneath it wasn't gone. How bad is Koda? He is exhausted, but Midoriya was on his knees, gasping, barely conscious. He is not. He's not seriously injured. He's better. DABI turned his back to them, facing the Nomu once more. Now just get behind me and sit the hell down. The response was instantaneous. Midoriya dragged himself backward with his one working arm. Shoto crawled, ribs grinding, blood in his mouth. Even Bakugo, a boy who considered compliance a personal insult, was moving. He stood on trembling legs, his ruined, gore-slick hands hanging at his sides, and retreated behind DABI's shadow without a single word of protest. Koda was already behind them, pressed against a collapsed pillar, shaking. The thin Nomu attacked first. It moved with that sickening, physics-defying velocity, the same blur and vanish trick that had been dismantling the students for the last 10 minutes. It reappeared in DABI's blind spot, its clawed hand already mid-swing and aimed with mechanical precision at the base of his skull. DABI's spider sense had already caught it, and his left hand blocked the attack cleanly. He caught the creature's wrist out of the air without so much as turning his head. Crush. His fingers closed and the bones underneath compressed and broke. Arachnid genome, 30 out of 100%. Even at 30%, he sensed the attack coming before Nomu had finished deciding to make it through its intent. His body, rebuilt through the super soldier, was more than capable of processing and reacting in time. He still hadn't turned around. DABI rasped. What did I expect from a lab-grown bird brain? The last batch of Nomu actually had some weight to them. What are you? The budget model? The scrap they send out when the real projects are busy. He twisted the creature's wrist to the point that the entire forearm separated at the elbow, tendon snapping and bone pulling free from the socket. DABI tossed the severed limb aside as if it were a piece of trash. The thin Nomu shrieked, a mechanical keening of pure shock. It tried to blur away its hyper-regeneration already budding pink, raw tissue from the stump. DABI's right hand came up. Blue fire condensed. It flowed along his fingers, compressing under the sheer force of his will until it achieved a physical, razor-sharp density. It shaped itself into a blade, a sword. The lines were clean, the edge a shimmering, ultraviolet white. It burned at temperatures that should have made cohesion a physical impossibility. Yet the fire held its shape because DABI commanded it to. Sun breathing. Seventh form, sunflower thrust. He moved, however, it wasn't in one particular direction. His body seemed to split into a dozen flickering phantoms, afterimages trailing behind him, each one vibrating at a slightly different frequency, a slightly different angle. It wasn't a cloning quirk, but was a lethal application of raw super soldier. Speed combined with deliberate rhythmic variation. Each shift in his velocity left a visual echo that Nomu's hyper-accelerated perception couldn't distinguish from reality. The thin Nomu's head jerked left and right, then snapped back. Its predictive systems were screaming, unable to lock onto the real DABI because all of them were him, fractions of a second apart, all converging on the same kill point. The fire blade hissed through the air. In a single, fluid rotation, the sword sheared through Nomu's remaining arm at the shoulder. Before the limb could even touch the floor, a second, inverted cut took both legs at the knee. Thud. The Nomu dropped. Within seconds, it was a truncated, twitching mess lying on the ground. Its regeneration fired frantically, trying to rebuild four severed limbs simultaneously, but the blue fire cauterized the cells at a molecular level. DABI was already above it. He had pushed off the cracked floor without breaking stride, using a localized burst from his heels to gain height. He came down like a falling star, the blade driving straight into the exposed, pulsing brain case. The plasma sword punched through the reinforced skull. Blue flames flooded the interior cavity, an inferno of 2,000 degrees Celsius overwhelming the biological regeneration entirely. The tissue charred, blackened, and turned to ash within the bone. The Nomu's body seized once, went rigid, and then slumped into a heap of dead meat. It didn't get back up. 11 seconds, start to finish. The larger Nomu roared. The sound shook debris from the ceiling and made the ground vibrate. Charged, massive, unstoppable, fists swinging with enough force behind them to turn concrete to powder. DABI dismissed the sword. The blade dissolved into formless sparks and was extinguished. He turned to face the juggernaut with empty hands, neither dodging nor adjusting his stance. The fat Nomu's right fist came down with the weight of a skyscraper. DABI caught it with his right palm. The left fist followed a microsecond later, a blow meant to pulverize a human chest, and DABI caught that too. The impact generated a concussive shockwave that exploded outward in a perfect circle. Dust, glass, and chunks of masonry were launched like shrapnel. The ground beneath DABI's boots cratered, and the concrete spiderwebbed as he sank 3 inches into the floor. He didn't budge. The 100% super soldier and the 30% arachnid genome physical powers are far superior to any Nomu. DABI looked at the gray, corded fists locked in his hands. Then he looked up into the creature's vacant eyes. Shock absorption, right? He tilted his head, his grip tightening until the Nomu's knuckles began to creak and groan. I have been wondering exactly where my ceiling is these days. He smiled, and it had zero warmth in it. So do me a favor and hold still. His grip tightened another degree. The creaking became something worse. You're my punching bag for the next 30 seconds.
And that concludes this episode. If you enjoyed it, I'd seriously love it if you guys could leave a like on the video, as it genuinely helps out so much, and it keeps me going. Plus, it takes only 1 second. That said, have a wonderful day. See you in the next one.